Week 17, the fantasy championship. We'll break down every single game from a fantasy football and sports betting perspective on today's RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Along with Mario Puig, I'm John Mckenzie. Oh, wait, sorry. Sitting in for John Mckenzie, I'm Alan Seslowsky. What's up, my friend Mario?
Hey, not much, Alan. Thanks for stepping in today. Sorry about the aging experiment, John. I don't know which one is even real. I can't tell.
Yeah, nobody's mistaking me for John. You know, he's got the most beautiful mustache outside of Jim Coventry. So there's something in that, you know. You used to have like a big burly beard?
Yeah, so I can be recognized with a variety of looks because I don't have one. I just let my fur grow to a certain point and then I shave it all off because I don't believe in haircuts really. When the beard gets too long, I'll just shave it off. And when my hair gets too long, I shave it off. So sometimes people see me and they think I'm like, some biker gang person. And then other times of the year, they're like, oh, you have an afro. You catching me at the point in time where the beard was chopped off and the hair is at like a medium length.
Yeah, it's almost very Chia Pet-ish, but I can appreciate it, the many looks of Mario. But what we're going to talk about today is where in Week 17, it feels kind of weird to have a championship, your fantasy championship in Week 17, because traditionally it's been a 17-week season. But next week is the dead week. Do you have any thoughts? Like people were complaining, oh, the season's too long, but it's kind of the same thing for fantasy. But what's an extra week?
Yeah, I mean, I am as brain dead as you would normally be at the end of a season. Like it's not like I'm getting a second wind to carry me through this end here. But one thing that, one thing people could do to prepare for this, what seems like a new kind of era of fantasy football, this lengthened NFL season and whatever complications come with that, is you could play fantasy baseball or basketball, because anyone who's played fantasy baseball and basketball, they come in and play football. They're like, oh, that was comparatively easy. I didn't have to grind nearly as much. So it looks like we're just kind of in for there's like a new grind element to fantasy football that maybe didn't exist before, but I think we'll eventually adjust to it.
Yeah, but it's not I think people are mistaken because it's not the extra week that's making it a grind. It's the COVID season that's making it the grind.
And all the other crap that's been going on.
Yeah. So, because if this was just a regular season, another week, fine, no big deal. But anyway, we are where we are, and we are in the era of that. It doesn't matter what advice you give on Tuesday because it's going to be completely different on Thursday. So, the advice we give you today, hopefully, it lasts through the end of the weekend. But as you know, keep your phone, keep your notifications on, and everything's subject to change. But let's break down some of these games. Tell people who they should be starting in your fantasy championship. If you're watching on the live stream, tell us who that you made your championship. Let us know how many leagues you made it in. So just put that in the comments, and we'll try to get back to you as we can. Starting with the 1:00 slate, Tennessee is a 3.5-point favorite. Miami coming to town. Let's just talk about the Tennessee side first. A.J. Brown just makes this team a completely different animal, right? I mean, so are you starting Ryan Tannehill? Go through some of the key players, and with A.J. Brown back, who's startable?
Well, I'm kind of not that I actually hate the guy. I don't. I actually think he's a pretty good quarterback, but I'm kind of lower on Tannehill than most people, so I'm rarely going to give the any more than median point view on him, and usually beneath that. So I don't trust him to play well against really any defense in particular. And the Dolphins, they blitz a lot. That could burn them. That could just backfire, especially if they let Tannehill get that deep drop, get A.J. Brown deep into his route. If you let that play get to a certain point, they just kind of fold you up as a defense, no matter how well your pass rush is getting to them. Otherwise, you can't let that one play happen. And A.J. Brown basically never fails once it gets to that point. But that 49ers game was also an extreme example of how Tannehill can literally do nothing else at times over a course of a game. Like, he didn't get the ball to anybody else in that game. So I think we can count on A.J. Brown to do a certain amount of damage for his own part, and hopefully enough to make his fantasy people happy. But there being enough for Tannehill's investors to be happy, I think, comes down to at least one rushing touchdown, which at once could happen, but is also maybe a riskier proposition than some other quarterbacks might face.
Throughout this podcast, what we're going to also do is fans of Mario, fans of John know that they are the gold standard for rookie analysis and for Dynasty. And in addition to their offseason Dynasty podcast, we're going to be adding some more Dynasty content. We're going to be doing the show on Monday. I'll be hosting that. We'll have Mario on. And so we're going to reference Superflex Dynasty rankings, which we just put up on the site. Mario has his 1 QB Dynasty rankings, which he's going to sand down and get those ready for January 15th launch. Will you have those in order?
Well, I've been working on them in the past couple of days, but not nearly to the depth and precision that you have. So yeah. I would think I could get it done before the 15th, but
I'm giving you some rope there.
Yeah. I might end up needing it, so we'll see. It's at the latest, I guess.
Right. When we start our official Dynasty season. I think the second week in January starts our Dynasty season. So you're going to hear us refer to these Dynasty rankings, which you can get right now for free at rotowire.com/try, 10-day trial, get all our premium content. So where do you think that in Superflex format, but it doesn't really matter, you talked about Tannehill being kind of like a middling grade. Where do you think that I have him in our quarterback rankings? Or where would you put him in our quarterback rankings? I'm
not looking right now, but I did look at your rankings, and I did. I feel like I picked up the general theme, kind of philosophy behind it. So I'm guessing you have the rookies a little higher than maybe
no rookie. I don't have any rookies. I have current rookies, no next year rookies.
Oh, sorry, that's what I meant. So I mean to say, like, I bet he's well behind even certainly Trey Lance and Justin Fields, Mac Jones probably. So I guess I would imagine you have Tannehill at like quarterback 18 or something.
Yeah, and I think that's where I should have him. I have him a little lower than that.
Okay. I won't criticize that.
Yeah, no, I have him 23.
Oh, okay.
And again, this takes into account not where I think that he's the 23rd best quarterback. This takes into account where I think the market will be on him as well. Right. I try to bake market ADP projections into my rankings. So if I'm ahead on market, I'll be aggressive. If I'm below market and people want to follow my rankings, I'll be below. So obviously, in 2022, I do believe Ryan Tannehill will score more fantasy points than Zach Wilson, but I'm going to rank Zach Wilson a little bit higher because his long-term projection, age, all that kind of stuff. So that's how I do it.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Right. And I will definitely support your movement to have Tannehill any lower as well.
Okay, good. All right. So Julio Jones, at this point, you just drop him in if you're redraft for your championship league, let somebody else pick him up thinking he's still good if that's what they want to do.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, it seems like he can't play. It's frustrating, but like the question of anything in particular seems moot. Like, we don't know if he can play. Yep. So yeah, that's that.
Flip over to the other side of the ball, Miami. Okay, forget Miami's backfield for a second because it's anybody's guess on any weekend. But sort out, is Jalen Waddle now just like moving forward for next year, for this week, put him in there, set it, forget it status?
Yeah, Waddle is a total star, I think. And the funny thing is, this is something that people who have only seen him in the NFL might not realize. He's not even supposed to be the kind of player that he's been for the Dolphins. At Alabama, he was just murderously good downfield, just unstoppable. Pretty much every time the ball went his way, it was something gigantic happened. He won't always be an underneath specialist. I guess we need, at the very least, the offensive line in Miami to improve, and maybe it's fair to suggest he might need a better quarterback than Tua Tagovailoa, but that's a more bleak possibility because he's probably not going anywhere quite so soon. But if they start throwing downfield a little better, however they do it, then you're going to see a Tyreek Hill kind of year 1 to year 2 transformation, because Tyreek Hill actually averaged under 10 yards a catch his first season. And not that Waddle's that fast. He's not particularly close to that fast, but Waddle is good at worst in all the athleticism respects, and the skill element, the wide receiver just ability, is off the charts. Like, I think guys like Jalen Waddle and Elijah Moore are kind of what the biggest like Deontay Johnson fans wanted Deontay Johnson to be, which is to say, like, he's got all that skill, that ability, the moxie at receiver and everything, but he doesn't have the athleticism that these two do. So I think you're going to see Waddle become one of those top 20 kind of overall players in fantasy football and PPR anyway, pretty soon, because he's already shown the ability to thrive, dominate even as a role that doesn't really exactly fit his skill set. It's just the inability of the Dolphins to throw downfield is why Waddle has been mostly underneath. But he can do everything, and I think he will.
I think that it's an interesting, like when you step back and you look at the arc of his dynasty perception, he went from like a bust projection. Now, again, not that anyone thought he was going to be a bust in the NFL, but everyone's like, oh, they overdrafted him. What a stupid pick. They should have taken a lineman. And I think I was guilty of saying that myself. And then he went to being like, oh, okay, this is an interesting pick, to, oh, wait, he's startable every week, to now he has elite pedigree and elite dynasty status. I have him as wide receiver 9 in our dynasty Superflex rankings.
Yeah, I like it. I'm a super fan of Waddle's. If anything, I'm just going to encourage whatever. If it's recklessly high, I'm just going to get that much more supportive of it because I'm just on board. I don't think there's anything holding him back from. I mean, I guess even like a guy like Steve Smith was pretty short too, and he was so fierce with the ball in the air, and no one's going to be quite like that, not even Waddle. But he showed that you don't exactly need Aaron Rodgers to be a almost like MVP candidate level receiver, and I think Waddle can be that. I think he was definitely the best of those Alabama wide receivers, and I think in hindsight all of them are really good. So Waddle being the best must mean he's a very top of the list in the long-term window, especially.
I know I've heard other people say what you said about Tua. They're not so sure about him, but even though he may not be there for, 3 years from now, I mean, who knows what's going to happen next year, but isn't someone like Tua good for Waddle because of the deep connection that they had at Alabama? So even if he's not good for the team, doesn't what we know about Tua to Waddle, isn't that a good connection for fantasy?
Well, it's not bad. In any case, this rookie year has shown us sort of like what can be a worst case scenario for Waddle. It's like if he has a bad quarterback and the team's offensive line is the worst in the entire league and they can't throw 12 yards, then Waddle will catch 90 passes for, whatever he's done this year. I haven't looked at what his updated numbers are, but this should be in any case close to the worst case scenario for the kind of surrounding conditions that he plays through. And Tua is one of the toughest players for me to figure out because I don't think he's conclusively bad. Like some people that I know who I trust with quarterbacks, they do believe he's just straight up non-viable. And I'm not quite that low on him, but it has been discouraging at some points, and especially the lack of the downfield throws. Like I thought that was the one thing we could count on him with coming out of Alabama because he was landing those bombs all the time way downfield. But it hasn't happened yet. But the thing is, the offensive line there has been so bad too that I just don't think it's not really fair to judge him on it. Like I at once accept somebody predicting that he could be the bad, whatever, awful, but I don't think there's evidence in his play specifically because the offensive line is just so awful. I don't think anyone could play there. So I'm actually more optimistic maybe than most people by a slim margin on Tua, if only because I think it's kind of like a non-applicable grade we have to give him so far.
He was like one of those flick of the wrist. Oh my God! It dropped right in the bucket. QBs in college, right in his peak, right? He would just
right. He's not like a gun quarterback, but he's precise and like a dart throwing kind of quarterback. Like he put enough zip. It's not like you would wait for these ducks to land in college. Like that's not why he's unable to throw. It's more like he's just kind of rattled, or he's got this rhythm in his head, like 3, 2, 1, get rid of it. And he's right to feel that way. He's right to assume that the heat is there because it is. It's just at Alabama, it's kind of like it's not that much different than Mac Jones at New England. Like he was landing bombs downfield all the time at Alabama too, but in his case, he just doesn't have the receivers to threaten that part of the field is what I think the problem is. Whereas with Miami and Tua playing there, it's like if he waits for his receivers to get 45 yards downfield like he did at Alabama every other play, he's breaking something after a while.
That sounds like a good decision. And you know what? One thing we appreciate here at RotoWire, Mario, is making good decisions, and even more so, the right decision. So listen up, everybody. We have an incredible offer for you from RotoWire's newest partner, WynnBET, the premier digital casino and sportsbook. WynnBET is now exclusive sponsor of RotoWire Fantasy Podcasts. WynnBET brings you the latest action with user-friendly interface, moneyline bets, boosted parlays, under-overs, round robins, live betting, and so much more at your fingertips. If you don't want a sports bet, you can go right into WynnBET's digital casino, take a spin at roulette, double down at blackjack. WynnBET is currently available in 6 states. While rapidly expanding at WynnBET, the possibilities are limitless. WynnBET is currently offering RotoWire listeners a risk-free bet up to $500. For your first wager, download the WynnBET now. That's WYNNBET. That's like Win the Casino, right? WynnBET, the exclusive partner of RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcasts. I was trying to purposely do a transition thing. I'm practicing my my Joe Buck level of transitions, you know.
I thought it was good.
All right.
I always feel like I'm listening to a pro, Alan. When
thank you.
I'm always surprised when you're like, oh, I was tinkering on something, trying to get this right. I didn't notice it was ever wrong.
That's awesome, brother. I appreciate that. All right, so let's pick this game real quick. It's Tennessee, always dangerous. 3.5 points, giving it home. Miami come in, getting the field goal and the hook. What do you like?
Yeah, I would take the Tennessee side. A guy like Jeffrey Simmons could really cause problems for that interior Miami line where they've got a couple bums, I imagine, and Austin Jackson, who started the year as their left tackle. Now he's failing at left guard. Those guys going against Jeffrey Simmons is a problem. And I guess with Tennessee kind of easily shutting down the run, you don't really expect Duke Johnson to break back out here. So I will say, I think Devontae Parker and Jalen Waddle are pretty dangerous for the Tennessee defense, but Christian Fulton's been playing really well. You'd think he'd be on Parker here. Waddle largely benefited, I would say, from like the outside coverage, Paulson Adebo and Marshawn Lattimore being so good for the Saints because it just forced the ball back inside in the slot where Waddle tends to run. So Waddle should keep going here. I just don't know if we can expect Waddle in a basically one-on-one matchup with AJ Brown's production. And I don't really think it's fair to expect him to keep up there, especially when that offensive line for Miami can just fall apart.
Yeah, I think that this is going to be a battle. The hook gets me over to the Miami side, but I do agree with you that Tennessee should win this game, but I think it's going to be a field goal game, so I'll take that hook. All right, let's move along. Buffalo, big favorites, 14.5 points. Atlanta coming in. We've seen games like this in the NFL season where like, oh yeah, you just take Buffalo. They're going to crush them. But Atlanta has been they're like a good, bad team. They're there. They on their best day, they're competitive. They have players we like. Let's first talk about the Buff. And we've seen big underdogs fall this year, especially lately. Start with Josh Allen. I mean, this is the first time in a long time we've seen the QB1 go back to back in fantasy, right? I mean, usually the QB1 falls to like QB4 or deeper. This is going to be back-to-back years for Josh Allen. Is he going to be your QB1 heading into next year in redraft, or would you do it differently?
I don't know. I mean, I would bet that for a technical QB1, he has a pretty low win rate this year because he really struggled early in the year. He had a couple nasty dud games that you basically can't afford taking in the 4th round or wherever he tended to go. So he's really poured it on in a few games. In other words, and granted, lately, if you did make it in, you're doing well because he did save some of his biggest games for the fantasy playoffs. But the one thing that I would say about him is I won't count on a 2020 level of passing production. I guess we'll see if they get Gabe Davis on the field more instead of like Cole Beasley. That would be helpful. If they got a speed guy sort of to be their new John Brown outside, that would help too, because I think it got a little harder for Allen when the field got shrunk on them this year. But his rushing ability, is he showed, he can lean on that sometimes, even when he's really struggling as a passer. And if you're claiming the whole team's ground game, it doesn't matter if you struggle as a passer. So there's definitely a good case to make for him staying number one. I'll definitely have him ahead of like Lamar Jackson, who I didn't this year, especially if the Ravens don't fire Greg Roman and hire someone who's not a fool in his place. Kyler Murray, you can't count on him to last the whole year at this point. So it's, I guess, down to him and Mahomes, and I don't really know where it feels I don't know, wrong to go against Mahomes, but maybe it's the right choice. We'll see. In any case, in this game, I am not worried about the Falcons making this a serious game. Like maybe they cover that is a lot of points, granted, right. 13.5 and now 14.5. But the Buffalo defense, I think, basically will devour everything that the Falcons do vaguely well. I think the Bills defense is well built to stop that. So granted, we did have that insane Jacksonville game with Buffalo, but I don't know. I still consider this impossible for them to even like break a sweat in this one.
I mean, the genie's out of the bottle with Isaiah McKenzie. Was that
was weird.
Yeah, I mean, but he did do it last year too. When given the opportunity, he had a couple good games. So fantasy managers who are, just are in deeper leagues with 2 flexers or 3 wide receivers in a flex, they're asking a lot of questions smartly if they could play him again. Would you advise someone in their championship game to go back to Mckenzie? I mean, did the Buffalo Bills see that and say, hey, we got to get this guy 6-7 targets in the Cole Beasley role?
Well, first of all, that was probably the best game of his entire career, maybe even going back to high school. Like in college, Isaiah McKenzie never did anything like that. He is very small. Like I think he's actually smaller than what he's listed at. I think he might be like 5'7", 170, something like that. And he's also a bit of a fumbler, so he's done better about that lately. But that's one way he's found the bench in the past, despite being always in his NFL career and Georgia career, he's been a menace with the football. He's a terrifying returner. So on the one hand,
he's listed at 5. By the way, he's listed at 5'8", 173.
Yeah, I think at the combine he might have been 5'7", but in any case, he's always been dangerous with the football. So last week was kind of the answer to the question of like, what happens if you just give him the ball that many times? And nothing went wrong there. Obviously, it was he carried the offense arguably in that game. So I think they're compelled to see what more he can do. I don't know. It's like in this game, if they don't need Diggs, if they kind of make it a laugher early on, it's easy to imagine Mckenzie staying involved over the course of the game, even kind of like becoming their lead target over the course of the game, because they probably want to evaluate him more. They probably want to see, like, can he help us this way in the playoffs? Can we count on this happening again? So they have reason to see how much more he can do. The question of whether you play him in fantasy, I guess, just comes down to like, how rich are you at receiver? If you're still going, you might be pretty good at receiver and maybe shouldn't mess with it. But
well, let me ask you this. Hold on. So like, what if you have, like, you had Mike Williams, so he's probably not playing again. So you got to choose. I'm going to play Isaiah McKenzie or I'm going to play like Jarvis Landry type, like someone who'd be like wide receiver, like 27 in your ranks. Would you play McKenzie over one of those guys?
Well, I guess the other thing we got to keep an eye on is what the Bills say they're going to do with Beasley, because if they're activating him off the thing and they say he's starting, I don't know. Right. It's hard for me to say play McKenzie over Jarvis Landry if we think Beasley's playing so many as 20 snaps. But the Bills should do is just leave the better player. McKenzie is probably the better player than Beasley at this point. They should just leave him in. So if they do that, if they give us some indication that they're going to keep rolling with McKenzie, I would kind of like him more. But Jarvis Landry does have a certain floor offering that McKenzie can't in the event that Beasley plays 20 or more snaps.
So would it be fair to say that if you're looking at the projections and you see yourself as like a 70-30 underdog, you may want to play McKenzie over
McKenzie has the upside, definitely. Like if the upside is the pursuit, then Landry just categorically can't compete with him.
Right. And if you're the 70-30 favorite in your championship matchup, you may want to go for that safer floor. So that decision will be based on your matchup and how you perceive it. Go over to the other side of the ball a little bit. I know, the story of 2021 fantasy football cannot be written without 2 players on the Atlanta side. Kyle Pitts remained a story from the pre-draft process all the way through now, right? I mean, he's an important player in redraft. He's an important player in dynasty. And then the story of Cordell Patterson, which is amazing. I mean, Cordell Patterson is more of a redraft for next year. I mean, where do you think, let's say nothing changes in Atlanta, Matt Ryan's still there or a comparable quarterback and Arthur Smith is still there and they don't add a running back of note. Where do you think that Cordell Patterson's ADP will shake out for next year?
I don't know. That's a tough one. I guess it's almost a little bit like when Damian Williams got hot with the Chiefs a few years ago, and he was such a contested, like second, third round kind of range pick. And basically neither side was really right because he just got hurt and just kind of never really played that well, but or not that much rather. Cordell is I can't remember a case like him. I mean, he's got the pedigree that Damian Williams never did as an undrafted player, technically being a first round pick, although at another position. So he's a great athlete. The one thing is he's also getting up there a bit in age already. Like he's
30. He'll be 31 when we start next season, but it's low mileage. I mean, you thought you were going to say like 28, right? He's 31.
No, I mean, I thought it might have been that. I was just kind of like crossing my fingers. I was hoping because like in my head canon, like Cordarrelle Patterson has just been around my whole life. It feels like so. I was like,
he was a first round pick when he came out. And
him
crazy.
And Justin Hunter were in the same draft, and Justin Hunter's been in our distant past for years now. So Cordarrelle is up there, and the possibility of him being particularly close to a workhorse doesn't seem very high. Like I don't think he'll get as many touches per game as he did, or per snap anyway, as he did this year. So we'll see. I think they're going to have to do better than Mike Davis as a second running back. Like they're still trotting out Mike Davis at the beginning of games. So we'll see. I believe in Cordarrelle's ability from scrimmage. I don't think any of that is a mirage, but I do think this year, the touchdown carries, some of the big play frequency might regress. And so we'll have to see where his price comes down. I think it's going to be a heated debate, and there are going to be maybe some drafts where you get, people who are unusually high and somewhere they're unusually low. And ideally you can strike in the second case if you're going to get him. But yeah, I love Cordarrelle. I hope he does well.
If you're put in the comments, if you're listening to this live stream, where do you think Cordarrelle Patterson's ADP will fall? What round he'll fall in next year's drafts? I think that he probably can produce like a late first rounder, early second rounder, but I agree with you that he'll be great value. That's what people will be saying in the end of the third round. It's for those of you.
We'll see. I mean, I think it's going to be a heated debate, and it could be one of those things where if some big personality, some big account like gets a certain narrative to take track, you'll see it show up in the ADP. So we'll see how the public opinion comes down on it. That's always important.
Not that I would bet a single nickel on this game, but 14.5 points, Bills, Falcons. What would you take here?
I would take the Bills because Matt Ryan gets reliably bad when you take him out of domes, and I think going to Buffalo has to be. It's in like the 5 worst places you'd go on the road, like along with Arrowhead and Foxborough or whatever else. So Lambeau. I think that the Falcons are at very serious shutout risk here, and the Bills are likely to go over 30 points.
Dynasty ranking, we're always going to come back to that since we're getting into that season coming up in a month, and we have a lot of Dynasty players that listen to you. Kyle Pitts is the tight end one still in Dynasty?
Oh, well, I think there's a case to make for especially guys like Kittle and Waller, who I realize they're not exactly young, but
Kittle 28.5, Waller 29.5.
So what is Kelsey's like 33 now? So if they can give you another 4 years of outproducing Pitts, will we look at that 5th year and say, well, it was still right to have Pitts ahead because now he's better. So it's up in the air to me. I don't really have I tend to think of it as tiers, I guess. And I'm a Pitts optimist. Don't get me wrong. I think he's actually done amazing this year. The reason he's disappointed is because Matt Ryan, and I get not that it's Matt Ryan's fault exactly. Matt Ryan's production is disappointed for reasons that maybe Matt Ryan couldn't control. But that was the issue here. Like if you look at Kyle Pitts' numbers, if you thought he was going to be on the verge of 1,000 yards going into the 16th game, you would have said like, oh yeah, he's worth buying at that price because we figured he'd have more touchdowns at the very least and better consistency. I realize he's had basically like 3 or 4 viable games and then a lot of duds.
Right. Well, he hasn't gotten hurt, so it's an accumulation play. But again, that's a skill, right? Getting hurt.
He's 9.4 yards per target as a player who turned 21 in the season in an offense that's nowhere near that figure. It's like it's the pie that's the issue with the Falcons offense. It's too small and there wasn't enough to go around. It's like we went drafting Pitts thinking that this would be an offense where Matt Ryan threw for like 4,400 yards, Calvin Ridley leading the way, drawing some of the coverage away from Pitts. And that wasn't what happened. Pitts had to carry the whole offense. And it's to me impressive that he only like the touchdowns is the only thing wrong with his numbers. Basically, if he had 8 touchdowns instead of 1, there would be basically no criticism of him. 9.4 yards per target is way above the team baseline, and he was the lead target. So it's impressive. The problem is Matt Ryan must have had like one of the highest league totals for games throwing under 170 yards. And there's only so much one player can do about that. Obviously, it was not worth the pick at that price, but it's not that he failed. The reason that people were cold on Pitts at his ADP was like, he's going to fail. He's a rookie tight end. He's too young. Rookie tight ends never do well. He did well. The team did not. Right. So anyway, I think Pitts is the man. I think he's going to be the best tight end ever, basically.
Our colleague Chris Liss often says on average tight ends fail, but if you find out or if you're going to cross a river and on average it's 4 feet deep, it's a fool's errand to cross that river because it could be 1 inch deep when it starts and it could be 40 feet deep in the middle. So you don't want to say on average this river is 4 feet deep because that could sink you. Yes, on average rookie tight ends fail, but when it's Kyle Pitts, he's not the average tight end. So I think that makes sense. And that's why I have him as the tight end 1 in our dynasty rankings. But you said something important. There's 5 tight ends that I like that are just every week plug them and play them. And I will be drafting the cheapest one. So if you want to take Kyle Pitts tight end 1, or if you want to take Mark Andrews, if he ends up being tight end 4, that's fine. I mean, you didn't.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, Matt Ryan only he's up 35-55 going into this 16th game. I thought for sure he'd be over 4,000 yards going into this year. And man, if he had Pitts, would have been looking much better yet. Would have been a slam dunk tight end 1 in rankings, I guess.
Yeah, I think there's more than a 50% chance that Kyle Pitts will be catching passes from another quarterback next year.
Hopefully with a better offensive line too, more than anything.
That's fair. And this is going to be one of the most interesting quarterback shuffle off seasons. And all the dynasty rankings that I've put up, that you've put up for your 1 QB rankings, which you can get right now for free at rotowire.com/try, they're probably going to get mixed up once the quarterback shuffle happens.
Obviously,
Devonte Adams' dynasty value is heavily tied to who his quarterback is. And if it's not Aaron Rodgers, that is a problem. All right, let's move on. Got a lot of games to cover, but before we move on, I just want to let everybody know that the NFL season is heating up for the playoffs, and Yahoo is going big on DFS. There will be a ton of big prize contests throughout the year with Yahoo, including a multi-entry contest that's shark-free. To celebrate, Yahoo is going big on DFS as they do a shark-free $1 million prize pool with $100,000 for first. Mario, have you played DFS over at Yahoo at all?
I haven't.
That's fair.
A lot of I'm just too lazy, but it looked nice when I looked at it.
And again, that's why they're trusting us to do this spot, because I played it the other day and it's a great interface. The pricing is a little bit softer, so you can do more things. And there's not a lot of sharks there. So there's winnable contests and there's tons of overlay because most people don't play over there. So you're entering a contest that's supposed to be, 10,000 people and there's like 6,000 people in it. So it really increases your equity. So, give it a shot.
I'll have to look into that.
It's definitely, like I said, because I'm a casual DFS player and I'll get eaten up by the sharks unless I get lucky. So it's a good spot to play. And they have a little promo going on right now. If you go over there and you visit sports.yahoo.com/daily-fantasy/welcome to get a free $10 offer. Okay. You get a free $10 to play in any contest. All right, let's move on. Next matchup that is Jacksonville is there's a lot of big spreads on the board. Jacksonville is going into New England. New England is up to 15.5 right now. I
would say higher yet.
It's probably, I mean, this may have been the opening line. I was probably going to close at like 17.5. I heard you on, I think it was on Sirius you were talking about Trevor Lawrence. Now he's going to be an interesting dynasty rank for next year.
Yeah.
You had you actually persuaded Chris Liss, and you persuaded the listeners too. You made a great case because there's going to be people that are lower on him. He was a first-round dynasty superflex startup pick last year. I've seen him. I've done one draft already. I know I'm a sicko where he's fallen to the back end of the second round, even in superflex. Make the case for Trevor Lawrence moving forward.
Well, the case for the future is still kind of pending an improvement in the surrounding conditions, right? Like I am not going to be super gung-ho if he's going into next year with like Laviska Shenault and Laquan Treadwell as his starting receivers and James O'Shaughnessy as his starting tight end. That would be pretty discouraging because this is not an NFL roster that he's playing with right now. I think even DJ Chark being out there would have made a huge difference, especially at this point in the season, especially after Urban Meyer was fired. But you can play a style of defense that defends maybe 15 yards of the field and you will never be hurt by this offense the way that its receiver personnel is right now. And you watch the tape of Lawrence, it looks a lot better than the numbers. And I admit the numbers look completely non-viable. If you run historical,
he has one touchdown in the last 8 games, I think.
Yeah, like if you run a query for like other quarterbacks who have his numbers, it's probably like Blaine Gabbert or something like that. And I don't know, nobody else. So I understand the pessimism, and I'm not saying anyone is wrong to have it, But when I watch the tape, I still think he looks awesome. I think you see these throws that the receivers are just dropping, and these are lasers way downfield. He sets up quickly in the pocket. He still has poise. Like at least he's not looking like he's shook at this point. I think he's a winner. So I trust him to handle himself in this like rebuild that they need to do. I hope they keep Chark. Actually, I think they should. He should be cheap coming off of the injury, heading into free agency, at least like get him to a 1-year prove it deal kind of thing. And as long as they get that speed threat, like Lawrence specifically would thrive downfield. Like his ability to set up quickly in deep pocket setups and just shoot these lasers down the field. I think it kind of goes to waste if you're running like a West Coast offense kind of thing. And even if you're doing like a play action heavy downfield strike offense, it's like that's a starting point. That's a little better. But I want to see like two corner threats at the outside receiver spots. And by the corner, I mean the corner of the end zone. Somebody who makes those safeties know, like, you have to turn and run. You have to be prepared to every play, because if you're opening up the field to him that way, those lasers there's so much room for him to shoot through. And I think it's going to clearly work, but it's not going to work with Laquan Treadwell and Marvin Jones running those routes, especially if they're going to drop the ball the few times they do get open at all. So I think that with Urban Meyer being just the worst coach ever, having so many of these snaps, so many of these targets going to guys like Laquan Treadwell and Jamal Agnew, Laviska Shenault playing out of position, Dan Arnold, I don't think any of it's really applicable. I think it's a non-applicable grade that he gets. So I'm still looking at him from the prospect profile of coming into the league. I'm basically putting up a blank season in between 2020 and 2022. And don't get me wrong, I'm not going to assume that it just gets rosy. Like, we got to see. It would be nice, for instance, if this fool owner would at least fire Trent Baalke, this snake Trent Baalke, instead of keeping him around. The guy who wanted to hire the racist strength and conditioning coach from Iowa, the guy who wanted to do all these stupid things, of course, with the 49ers even beforehand. He did a bad enough job to not get considered for this one, let alone keep it after the kind of year that they had. But if they did get Chark back, and if they added another pretty good fast guy at the other receiver spot, get Shenault in the slot where he might actually be able to play, then we're talking again, and I'll be pretty interested. But in the meantime, the Jaguars need to look like a vaguely functional organization, which they definitely are not for the most part.
Okay, here's your unrestricted free agents coming in to this year. This is who they could sign.
Will Fuller.
There you go, Will Fuller. But again, you're going to rely on that. I mean, that would be great when Will Fuller's on the field. But you got Allen Robinson. Wouldn't that be amazing if he goes back to Jacksonville?
I wouldn't like him so much. I want speed. Yeah.
Right. Well, let me just go down to your top 6 or 7. No. And if you jump in when you hear one that's interesting to you. So Allen Robinson, we agree that's not the right fit. It would be interesting. Chris Godwin, scratch him off for. Someone's going to give him a contract, but he's not going to be there for at least the first 8 games, 10 games. Which is, by the way, keep that in mind when you're drafting next year. Chris Godwin had a late season, was ACL, so he's likely. I would be shocked if he comes back before week 8. Devonte Adams is not leaving Green Bay without the franchise tag. They're not letting him go anywhere. You just mentioned Will Fuller, and then you got T.Y. Hilton, still has some speed, but a little bit washed up. Juju, Emmanuel Sanders, A.J. Green, this is not a great list. Mike Williams, Antonio Brown theoretically is a free agent. I'm looking at Odell Beckham.
That would be more like it. Like him, he would be fine. I don't know how much he's going to cost, but that is the kind of guy that I want. Because so someone might remember me as a Shenault critic, because there at one point was the debate like Shenault or Chark, and I was like, Chark is clearly their number 1 wide receiver. Shenault can't run downfield, and at the time, people were the biggest Shenault fans were like, "Oh, he's Dez Bryant. It's going to be great." Like, no, he's not. He's not Dez Bryant. But I do think he can play in the slot. I think he can be Mohamed Sanu. And you can have Mohamed Sanu on the field when you have Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley. That's when Mohamed Sanu is the best Mohamed Sanu he can be. So I want that speed on the field. Beckham would do it. Will Fuller would do it if he miraculously plays, I guess. But yeah, the Jaguars do need to be seriously looking at this rookie class, which I still got to research those guys. It looks like it's going to be an awesome class one way or another, whatever the order of the names is. But yeah, I still got to figure out what I think about those guys.
Okay, moving over to the Patriots side a little bit. Mac Jones, by all accounts, has been a good fit in New England. He's let's call it a boring good pick for next year, especially in super flex leagues where that's what I want my quarterback to be. I want someone that's just stable, that has the job, that's going to be a caretaker. But for your Week 17 championship, is there any running back that you would feel comfortable starting? Damian Harris after his 3-touchdown outburst. Are you good starting him?
Yeah, I like Harris, and if Stevenson's ready to go, I don't know what the latest is with him. Like this spread is, I think, on the right track. And when there's a victory of this degree, multiple running backs can get involved, especially when it's a run-based offense like this one. So Harris at least, and maybe Stevenson too.
I've been a little disappointed in Jonnu Smith in redraft leagues. He was dropped a long time ago, but I play in a lot of these tight end premium 2 tight end leagues where he's rostered everywhere. Why do you think Jonnu Smith? He was inside of most people's top 12 going into the season. If not, he wasn't much lower than that. Why do you think he failed from a fantasy perspective so much this year?
Because they paid him a ton of money to not catch passes, and I don't know why they want to run that offense, but yeah, Jonnu Smith is quite a bit shorter than Hunter Henry. I guess they're similar weight. But yeah, they haven't used Jonnu Smith anything like the Aaron Hernandez kind of role, which he could definitely do. I don't understand why they haven't. It seemed like for a few weeks they were trying to get him going as a pass catcher, but they basically don't give him routes. They're trying to use him like Kyle Juszczyk or something, paying him as the 4th highest paid tight end in the league to do it, paying him more than Hunter Henry to do it. I don't know. I think clearly there was a way for him to work in this offense, and maybe part of the problem is the receiver personnel. Like all the receivers they have, there's Nelson Aguilar who just isn't good, and then there's a bunch of guys who can't run further than 10 yards downfield. So yeah, if you have 4 route runners on a play and they're all running within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage every single play, you're probably not going to have room for Jonnu Smith to step in there. It's like the receivers are going to take precedent. The more inline tight end, even who's Hunter Henry, would probably be closer. So I think they need a speed receiver to make the field bigger, give Jonnu room to run routes. In the meantime, it doesn't exist, and they're basically making him a very fast offensive lineman, which, Bill Belichick is a great coach. He will apparently always be terrible at evaluating talent on offense, and he'll never know how to spend his resources there.
Yeah, I don't know what the cap situation is. I think a lot of these contracts that were head scratchers in the offseason with Kendrick Bourne, Nelson Aguilar, the 2 tight ends have tied up money at least for 2022 because some of the free agents, I thought last year Chris Godwin might have been headed there. Obviously, that didn't happen. But Allen Robinson and Juju Smith-Schuster are the 2 free agents that I would keep an eye on. But I don't know how they're going to do it with with their cap room right now. Let's just keep moving on just so we can cover all these games. The next game is another 1:00 game. The Las Vegas Raiders are going into Indianapolis. The Colts are 6.5-point favorites. Let's start with the Vegas side. It's been an interesting year there. Derek, do you think Derek Carr will remain the quarterback?
I don't think there's enough alternatives, and I'm not a Carr fan. I just don't think there's any good quarterbacks coming in.
And he's good enough, right?
Yeah, he's good enough.
He can do everything. Yeah, he's like he'll fall in that, like, in reality, he's probably like the 14th or the 18th best QB in that range.
Better than Tannehill, I'll say. I don't know where exactly, but he's clearly a better option than these rookie quarterbacks coming in too.
Okay, so that for the dynasty players out there, they're going to want to know about Bryan Edwards. First, just where were you on Bryan Edwards during the evaluation process? I mean, he went in the 3rd round his rookie year. He was a popular breakout candidate this year. Didn't really do it. Are you optimistic about him moving forward? Is he someone that you're going to be drafting in a dynasty startup?
So if he's almost free in dynasty leagues, then I definitely support getting him because I think he's a good player, but he's not good at what the Raiders asked him to do this year. And I don't know why this has to be so difficult sometimes. He does certain things well. They asked him to do none of those things. They asked him to be basically what they should have been asking Deshaun Jackson to do, what they're asking Zay Jones to do now, in light of Edwards never getting open downfield. But they're giving him average depth of target like 15 yards downfield. And to me, Bryan Edwards is basically Michael Thomas as a prospect. Hopefully not so crazy, but he is a guy who you use in the underneath and intermediate. The underneath if they're giving him too much cushion, the intermediate if they're playing press coverage against him. He can play the sideline. I'm not saying he's just like an inside kind of receiver. He can play the sideline and he can make downfield plays, but he's not going to make downfield plays if the corners are sitting off and preparing for an average depth of target of 15 yards. He's not fast enough to threaten them that way. Carr isn't good enough at throwing in that part of the field either. So Zay Jones runs a 4.45. He at the very least can run a little bit. So he's doing better in this role than Edwards was, because Edwards can't get to the break point in the route as fast as Jones can. And if they lowered his depth of target to something more appropriate, like 9.5, 10.5, I think you'd see Edwards' target rate skyrocket. But the design of the Vegas offense does not afford that possibility. So that was before Waller got hurt. Even after, they didn't adjust anything to get Edwards more targets. So I don't see how it gets better exactly. I think he's being misused, but that's not necessarily going to change, So I don't want to advise optimism, but if he's free, I kind of just generally like the idea of acquiring what I think is free talent, even if I'm not really sure how it's going to work out.
Yeah, the delay, and I agree with your analysis there. The problem is the way I play Dynasty is I want to load up on those Justin Jackson type of running backs in those later rounds. I want to go lean and mean at wide receiver in these drafts. That's like my new strategy. I just want my plug them and play them, and then I want to win running back in windows. But yeah, if you're going wide receiver there and you want to bet on a 13th round player in a 20 round startup, a 25 round startup, I think he's still a good target. Fill in the sentence right here. Fill in the blank. Remember when we used to play this game at school? It would be like, Josh Jacobs right now is RB blank. Don't look, Mario.
Oh, actual scoring. Okay.
Yep.
Through 18.
Oh, you are good at this, man. RB 17. You are good at this. All right. I still believe in Jacobs' profile for next year. He is like literally one of the least favorite players to watch right now. He's so boring.
I hate that offense. I think he's okay. I was never a fan, and I feel the need to defend him at times now because I just hate that offense so much.
Right. But are you willing to take Josh Jacobs? I think he's not going to go until like the 5th or 6th round. He'll go in what got
in
termed
redraft?
in redraft next year, he'll be termed. Yeah,
I would have done it this year, and I think if he hadn't gotten hurt, if they had a pretty brutal schedule, the circumstances weren't favorable. Like I don't think he's anywhere near as sluggish as his yards per carry would lead someone to believe. For instance, I think he definitely has it in him to have the first 2 seasons of his NFL career. One of those 2 seasons could easily happen next year, I think.
Yes, and speaking about and I like that too, but I still believe in him. He's still young. He's a first-round running back. He's had RB1 finish before, so that's a profile to invest in, especially when the price gets low. So I still like him, especially where his market perception is horrible. And we'll see what they add. Tight ends there, you got Waller and you got Foster Moreau. We actually had a question that pertained to Foster Moreau, so we can kind of take that as a 10,000-foot view. You like Moreau, right? I mean, Waller might be coming back though this week. Do you know the latest on him?
I don't. If Waller's back, then Moreau is a no-go because normally they try to keep him as like a mobile blocker for some reason. I don't know, especially if they're not going to give Edwards routes that he can actually run. It's like, then get Moreau involved somehow. I don't know. Just stop this Zay Jones offense. But anyway, I think
that's been another interesting thing this year. The Zay Jones
for him though. I just it's like man, it took a while, but it's good that he's doing something. I think Moreau is good, and if they keep giving him usage, I definitely like his chances. But let me see. Sorry,
our guy Scott says that he thinks Waller was put on the COVID list. If that's true, and you have I'm not doing again, news is coming fast and furious. So that's what we rely on the chat. The chat helps us. The chat is part of, what? We've seen a lot of fantasy football podcasts evolve into live streams, and the audience is now the third podcaster. I love it. Some people get they see it as intrusive. I love that we're lucky enough to have the audience participate. So thank you to any of those who ask questions and put comments in there. We rely on you. You're our researcher. You're our producer. So yeah, I still like Foster Moreau as a player. And I certainly, one of the questions was, would you play him over Cole Kmet? That's what, they'll be ranked similarly in.
I think I'd go with Moreau actually.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no problem there. And let's switch over to the Colts side of the ball. Jonathan Taylor. I mean, you don't need any fantasy advice to tell you to play Jonathan Taylor. And I think that there is not going to be one set of fantasy rankings that doesn't have him as the number 1 overall player in traditional 1 QB redraft leagues. I think the more interesting question for next year, Mario, is would you take Jonathan Taylor over any of the quarterbacks in Dynasty Startup Superflex leagues?
So I have not played in Superflex Dynasty, and I don't have a good sense for it. with that said,
what that means is that you need to get into a
Jonathan
Superflex.
Taylor fan. I mean, quarterbacks can play at a certain elite level for like 10, 12 years if they're good enough. The best running back realistically has like 3 or 4 years at most if they're kind of lucky, So I don't want to like say something bad will ever happen to Jonathan Taylor, but it's much more likely than a quarterback. So if Mahomes, Herbert, whoever we're thinking is a top 3 kind of quarterback annually for 10 years, I guess there's in a super flex format, it's tough to, I guess, say him ahead of them.
Well, here's, and I think a lot of sharp analysts like yourself are going to go there because that is a very sound and probably the high yield analysis. But here is the case that I would say if somebody took Jonathan Taylor first, and I'm not saying I would do this, but here's the case: is that on the 2-3 turn when you pick next, you could probably still in Dynasty get 2 good quarterbacks that are a little bit aged. You might be able to get like Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson. Whereas who are the running backs you're going to get? There's going to be good options there, but you're looking more at like a Leonard Fournette type, or probably more likely taking, your tight end of your flavor or a decent wide receiver. So I guess that there's going to be good quarterbacks on the next turn is the argument against it. But,
if you resolve to take those 2 quarterbacks, that would be a good win now kind of way to go too, I guess. And right. We should always try to win now, even though we are always tempted by those prospects and such.
Yeah. I'm working on a Dynasty article that I'm going to be posting, in a couple weeks, because I'm just trying to massage it out a little bit. But it's the 5 pillars of Dynasty. And Dynasty, everyone always thinks like, hey, I need this guy's going to be good for 5 years or 8 years or 15 years. You hear people say that a lot. And most Dynasty leagues don't last that long. And if you're in one that does, I think Dynasty is best played in 2-year windows, maybe 3 tops. Because, look back at what the magazine covers looked like 2 years ago, 3 years ago. There's some of what was it, David Johnson on the front, Todd Gurley? Those guys aren't even relevant.
RotoWire had a good little tradition of curses going there for a while. We had Vince Young on one and like Baker Mayfield or something.
But those were and those were reasonable long-term outlooks that just fizzle out. So I think that we have to reshape our mind a little bit. But yes, I think that Jonathan, it's not like if somebody took Jonathan Taylor first in a Superflex league over the quarterbacks, you wouldn't say, oh, what an idiot. You'd just be like, oh, okay, this guy's playing it a little
lot of gray area with this stuff.
Yeah, totally. All right. On staying on the Colts side of this game, and before we move on, anybody else interest you? Is Michael Pittman? He's a stardom, right?
For him, yeah, it should be fine. Like Casey Hayward's going to follow him around, and Casey Hayward's not going to let him get away. But Pittman doesn't really need to get open. Doesn't need separation specifically to be open, I guess.
Would you call him like a true alpha? Like, is he amongst the alpha wide receivers, or is he?
No, he's good. He's Malcolm Floyd. That's it. And I know like there's a lot of hype around him. Great, you can tell that the Ballard really was like leaning on Reich, and maybe Reich was on board with it. I don't know if they have a pact together or something. They're like, we got to get Pittman's numbers up. Like they're giving these short throws to him that they would get definite better yardage, like especially earlier this year if they had given it to Paris Campbell instead. But it's like they wanted to establish Pittman, so that at once assures him a certain target share, and it assures he'll be more consistent than most receivers. But he doesn't have the raw talent in my ability, and even if he did, he doesn't have the quarterback play to get into that sort of elite tier. It's like he's kind of trapped in that sort of Deontay Johnson purgatory where it's like tons of targets, but the quarterback kind of holds him back, and he's not Tyreek or Devonte or whoever, so he can't really like break through that one limitation. But he should be, I don't know what, like top 20 or something fantasy receiver. So in that range, there's a certain just that value alone is all you need.
All right, let's play a little either or for Dynasty because I'm fixing my rankings on the fly here. Okay, I'm going to ask you, would you, not going to say, but it's Michael Pittman for Dynasty or this player, and you just name the player or you say Michael Pittman. Okay, I'm going to do 5 of them. Knowing what you know now, you can't say, oh, if this happens and that happens. Just knowing we're drafting today, Mario. Okay, Michael Pittman, Terry McLaurin,
McLaurin,
Devonte Smith,
Devonte.
Calvin Ridley or Pittman?
If Ridley's playing, you
can't say that. You can't. You have to know what you know now.
I'll say Ridley. I hope he plays again.
Yeah, me too. All right, I'm going to give you 2 more. DJ Moore or Michael Pittman for Dynasty?
Moore.
Okay. Jerry Jeudy.
Pittman.
Last one, Elijah Moore or
Elijah.
Michael Pittman. Okay, good. All right, so I have Pittman a little too high. I thought I did, and I was a little self-conscious about his ranking. He had him at 15. I think he's better suited as wide receiver 20.
I could just be too low on him also, but yeah, I'm a super fan on Elijah Moore. He's like right next to Waddle for me, way up there.
Yeah, he's produced under adverse conditions, so I like that as well. All right, let's move on. Let's pick this game real quick. Raiders are in Indianapolis. Indianapolis getting 6.5. Who do you like there?
I'll take the Colts, but yeah.
Yep. All right. Yeah, I think so too. I think again, I wouldn't worry about the 6.5 points. If you think
it's a new line too, it lowered from 8.5. The one thing giving me pause is apparently it's like the betting volume appears to be on the Colts, and yet their line is getting smaller. So
what's the quarterback uncertainty? No one's sure if, as much as we don't love Carson Wentz, he does make a difference. He is a major upgrade from what would be Ellinger would be the quarterback. So
that's true. Yeah.
So that's where the uncertainty is, but the line is still open. All right. Jets at home. They're 13-point dogs to Tampa Bay. I don't think anybody's picking the Jets in this game. The line is interesting, but let's go with this is where I'm getting the most questions this week for week 17. Should I start Tom Brady or Trey Lance? I have had that question at least conservatively 10 times in the last few days. All right. Let's break that question down. Can you trust Tom Brady under the circumstances to deliver you anything more than a floor performance in a championship game?
Maybe not, but I don't know if you can count on the floor with Lance. So I would go with Brady. And the thing with Brady too is like he could easily score 4 touchdowns on like 25 attempts. Not that I'm predicting that, but he can get those touchdowns and still take the second half off.
Yeah. So, but without Godwin, Antonio Brown, he was 15 targets last week. It's almost like he came to the game like, no, we're getting Antonio's head right back in the game here. Gronk's been a little down lately. No Fournette. What's a reasonable projection? If this game gets blown open, if it's run heavy and it gets blown open, you could see them taking Tom Brady out in the middle of the third quarter.
That's true. I don't know if Tom ever wants to do that. He seems to always want to like run it up, even in inconsequential late season games. And
you still think he hates the Jets? I don't think he hates the Jets anymore.
I don't even think it's personal. I think he's just kind of a psycho, and he wants to just run up the score on everybody. But I think, you mentioned, Godwin, Evans being out, whatever. I don't know if Evans is back, but if it makes the game closer, that's just a reason to think that he stays in longer. So I don't know, maybe I'm just too optimistic about it, but whatever way I try to think it through, I feel like it comes down to it. I just keep coming back to go with Brady.
These guys are aware of the MVP voting. They look at the Vegas odds. I guarantee you they do. And Brady has fallen to, I think he's either the second or third. He's no longer the favorite after that dud he had against New Orleans. Yeah, Rodgers is the favorite. So if there's an opportunity for Brady to do what Burrow did last week, 505, this is the week to do it. So you might be right there. I agree. I would not have the stones to bench Brady for Lance, seeing that upside, because if his upside is probably Lance's upside is probably like a 10% chance of happening, and his floor is probably more like a 35-40%. And then obviously everything in between is probably his median projection of about 17 to 20 fantasy points. So I'm with you. All right. On the other side, Jets, who can you start in your championship? Is there anyone that you would even consider? If Elijah Moore may come back and play, they said he's 50-50 to play.
Man, that's tough because I love Elijah Moore, and if it were Joe Flacco or Josh Johnson or Mike White at quarterback, I'd be like, oh yeah, let's do it. But and not that I think Wilson is a bum or anything. I'm not a fan, but I don't think he can be blamed for struggling in these circumstances. So if he does, Moore can only do so much. Michael Carter, it's kind of a similar thing. It's like good player. If someone wants to play him, I'm not gonna say they're wrong to do it, and they shouldn't sweat it too much if they have to go with him. But yeah, if we could pick from the entire pool, I still would rather start with an offense that I think has more than a prayer, which I'm not convinced the Jets even have.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And even for next year, where do you think Michael Carter should be ranked amongst running backs? Let's call it for redraft right now. I know we're switching back and forth, and Jets will have their offensive line reinforced. Becton presumably come back. Elijah Vera Tucker has been one of and ends up being the best values in the first round.
Oh, nice. I hadn't been able to follow him, but I really liked him as a prospect. And those two are definite pillars.
Yeah. So Michael Carr, let's say that the Jets don't add anything other than just kind of, the same type of running backs they have. They try to bolster the passing game of the defense. Where would you take Michael Carter in PPR league? So running back what?
Pretty high. I guess I'm in my mind. I'm kind of like preparing for at worst or at lowest like 4th round kind of ADP and maybe even higher. Like I don't know what the demand will be, but he had a couple games there where in PPR anyway, a couple games that were really legitimately big point totals, and I feel like a few of them were like 40 snap showings. If he's getting 40 snaps in a game, he could return as high as a 2nd round value. So I I'm prepared to pay a pretty decent price for him, I guess.
Yeah, if you go, because next year I can assure you that the Sharp Dynasty players, and certainly it'll come out it will flutter out to the general community. It's going to be a wide receiver crazy year. Be prepared to pay up for wide receivers next year. I mean, 1st round wide receivers are going to include Justin Jefferson, maybe CeeDee Lamb, maybe. Certainly Devonte Adams and Tyreek Hill, if they stay in their same situations, you're going to see at least 4 or 5 wide receivers in the 1st round, maybe a tight end. I doubt it, but that is going to then push the other wide receivers up a little bit, making some of the running backs fall back. So if you end up participating in that 0 running back or wide receiver early start, I think you correctly identified Michael Carter as a really sharp pick in the 4th, 5th round.
Yeah, I don't even think he'll. Now, the more I think about it, I'm thinking it's going to be like the 3rd, but all the same, the point.
Well, knowing what you know now, would you take J.K. Dobbins or Michael Carter in redraft leagues next year?
Man, especially if Greg Roman is still the offensive coordinator, I think I'd take Carter. But I think Dobbins is the better player. I love Dobbins. All that said.
Yeah. So we've done an hour already, Mario. If you don't mind, I mean, we barely cover this stuff. I can keep going
we can
here.
Keep going.
Okay, good. All right. I just want to make sure. I don't want to take too much of your time. I know you have a wild
3-game RotoWire podcast.
That's right. But listen, we're giving people some good actionable intel here. And I know you're planning this wild party for New Year's Eve. You were telling me off air. So
I'm already late for it.
Yeah. It starts the day before, right? Yeah. All right. So I want to actually go backwards. I know we're supposed to be moving forward, but James Robinson for Dynasty. Can you even draft him at this point? And he had an Achilles tear. Would you say the chance of him playing in 2022 are what, like 20%? I'm talking about like.
Oh no, I think he'll play for sure. The question is like whether he's himself, I guess, and it wouldn't be until after the PUP list.
Oh my God, he's an Achilles tear. Isn't an Achilles tear like a full year recovery? I mean, look at Cam Akers. So it was basically like a 15-game absence. But then again, that doesn't account for the offseason. So
his was in August, wasn't it? So
yeah, so it's a 15-game absence.
Plus, first of all, the Cam Akers thing is insane. The idea that they're even considering playing him is like
I don't think they're going to. I think that's
right. Either Sean McVay is like making stuff up, or I'm going to have to seriously question his sanity. But I mean, Emmanuel Sanders had something like what was it? Like, I know it wasn't quite this late in the year, but he played it, I think, in week 1. I don't even know if he was on the PUP list, and he was like 32 at the time. So James Robinson, I mean, I think he's legitimately talented player. I can't tell if people still believe that he was sort of like lucky last year and that he was just kind of some guy who was hanging around in a team with nothing better to do than give him the ball. I think he's a legitimately good player. I think he's clearly one of the best running backs in the league. Not in the like elite tier. He's in that, David Montgomery kind of that, whatever you call that tier there. Still a totally good player. And if he's physically able to play, I don't think the Jaguars will keep him on the bench or anything. But yeah, we still have Travis Etienne there. Who knows what's going on with his foot? Who knows what's going on with that team in general, I guess. Obviously, his value took an enormous hit with that injury, and it could somewhat put his career on a permanently downward trajectory. But yeah, I think he's going to play. I'm not quite worried about that. I'm more worried about like, what does he have left when he does?
In redraft leagues, you just can't draft them because it's most leagues that have 5-person bench. I mean, you just don't draft them. I mean, that's an obvious thing that you don't need us to tell you don't draft an Achilles torn player. So, but I think in Dynasty, it's the more interesting question. Right now, I just put him in a place where you're not going to draft them RB50, but if the reports are good, I could see us putting him back up to like RB40, RB36. If there's encouraging news over the summer, I'm not drafting him just because there's so many players and he doesn't have that protected pedigree, even though he has 2 years of banked production, which is probably.
I mean, he's basically like a team captain there. So I don't know. Like, again, the Emmanuel Sanders case, he tore his Achilles at like age 32 in something like week 10, played the whole year. If Akers is like an 8-month recovery, maybe Robinson gets in at like the end of training camp or something. And I think it's the PUP list. And I think week 7, 8, whatever that would be, we see him come out, and maybe he's not the James Robinson we knew, but if he is, I think he would start playing at that point in time.
I like the team captain narrative. That almost assures he'll be there. But remember, we're going to have a whole new staff coming in. So, James Robinson, man, he just has not got a break. It's like, I guess that's the life of an
didn't even get a shot in the NFL. Like I heard from somebody that it might have been only the Jaguars, and it was like only after some person like lobbied at the last second to do it. Like he barely got into Illinois State, barely got to look at the NFL, and it's like clearly the guy can play. I don't understand why he never got a shot earlier. I had him ranked as like a 3rd-round prospect going into the draft, and when he went on draft, I was like, oh, come on, what the hell is this?
You know what's funny is that my favorite stat, and I'm probably going to muck this up a little bit, but James Robinson had more rushing yards than the team had passing yards.
Yeah, and he had like...
I'm talking about Illinois State.
And the second leading rusher had 400 yards. You know, he was. I've never seen anything like that. I've never heard of something like that.
All right, so maybe I'm too low. I'll push him back up to like RB40. This way, you'll still be ahead of market because no one's going to want to draft him. And if you have an IR spot, that's great. All right, moving on a little bit here. Rams at Baltimore. Rams are going into Baltimore. They're 3.5-point favorites. Let's start with the Baltimore side of this. Who's going to be the quarterback? Is Lamar back this week?
Well, they said he was limping in practice, so that doesn't sound good. And I don't trust anything with that offense anyway, so I'm not optimistic for him.
I mean, if you could play team quarterback, it doesn't matter if it's Josh Johnson, if it's Tyler Huntley, whoever's starting at quarterback, I'm comfortable starting in my championship game in Week 17. Is that analysis on point?
Well, the team quarterback part definitely makes it a little less, risky, but I think the Ravens get stomped here. I don't know. I think that Greg Roman's going to get worked. I think that the Baltimore defense can't play defense anymore, maybe against the run, which, by the way, Scott was asking about Herbert or Stafford.
Oh, yeah, that was Stafford.
I would go with Stafford because I think that they're going to just do whatever they want passing game wise. I mean, we saw Burrow is good. The Bengals have 3 really good receivers, but
for the listening audience, the question that Mario is fielding is Matt Stafford or Justin Herbert for all the nuts for the championship, and you're going with Stafford. Who the Chargers are playing Denver, right?
Yeah, and I like Herbert. It's not like I'd sweat it if I had to go with Herbert, but it's just. This is not a serious NFL defense that the Ravens have. Not that it's their fault, that it's the injuries, but they don't have a real defense. This was the defense that Joe Burrow lit up last week, right? Yeah, and again, I'm not trying to take away the credit from Burrow, but that is not happening if Marlon Humphrey is out there or just Marcus Peters. If both of them were out there, we're talking less than half of the output that he had. Stafford hasn't looked great to me in, 2 months, but I don't think John Walford would struggle to light up this Ravens defense if he needed to. I like that guy, John Walford, in the Superflex Dynasty leagues I'm with. I roster him. I mean, McVay likes him. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's it. It's more of like in that system, should Matt Stafford go down if you need him, and the backup. That's an underrated strategy in Dynasty Superflex. You said you haven't played the format too much, but not only do you need to roster every quarterback, you're rostering backup quarterbacks, as we saw this year with the COVID list. I mean, you're going to be playing Case Keenum. Theoretically, Kyle Allen. Is you're going to play Josh Johnson for 2 different teams. Is that unbelievable? He's the Adrian Peterson of quarterbacks. He wants to play for every team. I think he's played for like 10 teams or something. He's got to be at like a third of the league at worst. Yeah. Oh, that would be. I think that's a great career. Also, you have all these different jerseys with your name on it in your office. It's probably a nice collector's item. All right. So here's my question for you: who do you think is the better asset moving forward? And then we could talk about it in terms of Week 17. The Marquise Hollywood Brown for fantasy or Rashad Bateman. Who would you think should be ranked higher in our dynasty rankings? In PPR, I guess I'd go with Bateman. But if we're talking half point or standard, PPR, we don't do this. Well, the touchdown Hollywood Brown is a real thing, and Bateman, he kind of profiles better for those underneath targets. I think I know Brown gets plenty of underneath targets, but he needs the space to get those and the space to run afterward to make it work. Bateman, I think, can more navigate in traffic as just kind of like a bread and butter kind of thing. I don't think he's better player than Brown. I don't think he can compete with Brown downfield, certainly, but each of those guys and Mark Andrews in a functional, coherent Ravens offense would play their own respective role to their respective strengths. And I do think Bateman can be like the 90 catch guy while Brown is like the 70 catch guy who still has more touchdowns every year.
I don't think you even know it, Mario, but you just gave a hot take without knowing you're giving a hot take.
Oh, no.
I don't think the Dynasty community, their first
they hate Hollywood. They hate Hollywood, and they're way too high on Bateman. I love Bateman, but
I think you hit it right. I think that the Dynasty rankings are going to have Hollywood significantly higher. I think like you're going to see Hollywood at like wide receiver 15 and Bateman around wide receiver 24.
Oh, really? I thought it was the other way around.
No, I think you're going to say that's
every time I feel like other than you, every time I'm talking about, and John, of course, every time I'm talking about Marquise Brown, I feel like people are like, oh, but he sucks, right? You got to prefer Bateman, right? I'm like, no, they're both good, but Bateman is not a star. Hollywood is not a star either. They're really good players who have slight flaws in each cases.
Yeah, and Hollywood has that knockout punch in any given week. It's almost like a rich man's Deshaun Jackson this season, right?
I'm a big Deshaun fan, so I think it's more like 1-to-1 because I also think Deshaun is just awesome. He's one of my favorite players ever. But yeah, Hollywood's one of my favorite NFL players, if only because I feel the need to defend him so much because people are like, oh, he drops everything. He's tiny. He sucks. Like, no, he's really good. He's just not perfect.
I like Hollywood Brown too as well. Rams side of the ball. Sony Michel in your week 17 championship, if he's on your roster, you just put him in there. Like he's a top 10 running back this week, right?
Yeah. I don't understand how McVay thinks, but if he's going to bench the guy, totally bench the guy who he previously had taking every snaps at running back, then over the current starter with no actual reason for the change. He seems like he's going to stick with Michel until he comes up with an anecdotal reason to get mad at him or whatever.
Yeah, no, Sony Michel still looks like a good running back for me. I don't think that was ever. You can understand, not that we ever endorsed taking running backs in the first round, but you can see what Bill Belichick saw. When the guy is healthy, he looks like a guy that could just run people over, that he's got some moves, that he's a good player. He's like I said, he's not going to be the reason you win with his dynamic shifting, but he's a trustworthy guy that can just really wear out a defense.
Well, the narrative was the opposite almost on him. Like he was being sold as Alvin Kamara specifically, and I was like, "What the hell are you guys talking about?" And also they took him over Nick Chubb, so I hated the pick at the time. But he has to be fair. He's had some bad knee injury luck, but Michel is just a guy. He's just a guy. But when you're in one of the best offenses in the league, and especially if you're catching the Ravens with their, sixth string corners, just a guy will be more than good enough.
You know what's funny? A couple years ago, Michel was on a good run, and I had traded for him in a dynasty league and I traded away Terry McLaurin his rookie season after like he had 1 or 2 good games, and the league has not stopped laughing at me. Finally, this last 3-week window, I said, I told you so.
Yeah, and at the time, how could you have known which way McLaren
What I'm saying is I've been right for 3 weeks now. That was the joke, that even though it's been horrible for 3 years.
I wouldn't have laughed at you. I
know you wouldn't.
Guys, lay off, Alan.
Because that's the game. So when you're doing dynasty rankings, you're right, and then you're wrong, and then you're right again. So don't worry about it. There's no bad picks as long as you follow Mario's 1QB dynasty rankings, or you could check out my Superflex rankings, which are posted. Yes, which are posted now on rotowire.com/try. We recommend that you start getting in some of these dynasty startups. You can hit us up on Twitter, find out how to do it. If you're watching, Mario's Twitter is at Roto Mario? What is it nowadays?
RotoWire Mario, yeah.
RotoWire Mario. Mine's at Alan Seslowsky. Okay, let's move on a little bit. Odell Beckham, you're playing him over Van Jefferson at this point in week 17?
Yeah, I'm fine with whichever way a person goes. It's hard to separate them. I just think Odell's the better player.
Right. And I think that Matt Stafford trusts him a little more right now. I think he loves Van Jefferson, but I see where he's just recklessly throwing the ball to Odell, whereas Van Jefferson, it's a little bit more of the short stuff. And I don't know. I think
Van Jefferson is just kind of a guy, whereas Beckham to me is still a top 10 receiver in the NFL. Yes. So that's how I break the tie, I guess.
And I think that now Matt Stafford's becoming more comfortable with Odell. It seems that way, just anecdotally looking at it. All right, let's move on. Let's go to the Philadelphia Eagles game. They're coming into Washington. Oh, by the way, pick that game. You said you were going to take LA Rams in that game, right? 3.5.
Yeah, I would take the Rams to win by like 14.
Yeah, I like that bet too. I'm gonna play that one. All right, Eagles going into Washington. Washington looked horrible last week. The Eagles are 3.5-point favorites. Who's the Eagles running back that you're going to have the most trust in right now? I know things are changing rapidly, but are you playing Boston Scott with much conviction this week?
Well, if Boston Scott gets a lot of usage, I guess that would make me think it was a close game and the Eagles were trying to throw, or maybe even that the Eagles were losing and they're trying to throw. If the Eagles are smart, they don't throw that much, or at least they don't throw to the running back to start out. They need to establish the run threat and create from that template favorable looks from Hurts to throw selectively. And that's how they make that offense good. If they have to just expose Hurts right away, things can go kind of wrong. But yeah, I think Scott's a decent player. If they got to use him, I don't think he'll embarrass himself or anything. But if this game goes the way that the Eagles want it to go, I think Howard needs to get 15 carries.
Yeah, and I think Scott. I mean, Howard would have the stinger last week. I haven't seen an updated report from him.
Okay,
so
he's got a lot of those. I feel like he's got like 5 stingers.
I mean, that those big running backs that kind of bull their neck and then smash the line. I mean,
he needs to put on that all-stat suit if he's gonna be doing this. The big neck.
You remember the neck roll?
Yeah.
Do you
haven't seen
what
those
happened?
lately.
The neck roll is a thing from 1970s, 1980s football, and the barefooted kicker. Those are the two things I miss from 1980s football.
Yeah, they need the neck rolls back apparently because I mean, Allstott never got stingers, or I don't remember that anyway.
Right.
Anyway, if Howard can't really play, then Scott's got to do it. It's just all on him, I guess.
What do you think the Eagles will do for next year? Are they going to be in the quarterback search, or are they just finally going to say Jalen Hurts are going? Because those 2 picks that they have in the first round, like 4 weeks ago, were like pick 7 and 8. Now they're like pick 20 and 24. They're not getting a quarterback with those picks, or maybe they will.
They have 3 first-round picks total, so they could probably get pretty much anywhere they want to in the first round. It's just
so they have go over this. They have their own. They have Miami's.
They have Dolphins and the Colts, right? The Colts.
Okay, right. There you go. The Colts.
It's like they could probably get wherever they want to. I just, in a way, it would be a blessing if the picks lowering deterred them from trying to trade up, because I just hate this quarterback class. I don't know if I believe a single good starter. If there is one, I think it's Desmond Ridder. But
where does he go to school? Where does Ridder
Cincinnati.
go to school?
It's just like, even in his case, I would prefer to take him more like, I don't know, 40th overall. Not really, right. But that means he will probably go or if the NFL agrees that he's the 40th best player, then he will go in like the top 20 or something. But I'm not a fan of Howell. I'm not a fan of Willis. Can't stand the Kenny Pickett hype. It's just ridiculous to me. I'm so sick of hearing about it already. But in any case, the Eagles will not do better than Jalen Hurts at quarterback in this draft. In my opinion, that's true. So if those picks falling keeps them from trying to get specifically a draft pick quarterback, then I think that it'll benefit them in the long run. What I worry about still from Hurts's perspective is that they might get Russell Wilson. I don't know what to think of the Deshaun Watson thing anymore. I don't know if I believe he's even going to play again, but Russell Wilson clearly wants out of Seattle. The Eagles do have the ammo to get him. Who knows what else could go on, though? I mean, if one domino falls, like we saw with the Stafford thing this offseason, once that went, like all these other markets opened up and everything for a second there, it looked like the whole league was going to swap quarterbacks for about 5 minutes. So we'll see. But the Eagles, I think, could do better than Hurts, just not in this draft is where I see it.
Yeah, you mentioned something I want to just underline here is that there's 3 teams that have multiple first-round picks, the Jets, the Giants, and the Eagles. I don't think any of them are threats to draft a rookie quarterback, but they're, I think, likely. I would take the over on one of those 3, trades their draft capital and their quarterback for a perceived upgrade at quarterback. Either the Jets, Giants, or Eagles. One of the 3 will likely do it. I think the Giants are the most likely. Trade pick 5 and pick 6 and Daniel Jones, say, for Russell Wilson and Tyler Lockett, something like that. I don't think, I could see a trade like that going down, because Russell's value is a little bit depressed with his play down the stretch. So the Giants are not just going to surrender 2 firsts without getting something back that makes Russell Wilson comfortable. But it's an interesting conversation that certainly will be something great to talk about on podcast. But getting back to this game, Eagles game, Devonte Smith, are you trusting him in the championship? Are you still? I know you were pretty high on coming out, and he's looked good to me. Will you roll him out there right now?
It's not really a trust extent in fantasy because I don't trust the Eagles offense to conduct itself any particular way. I think Devonte Smith is awesome. I think if he gets targets, he will do damage with them. But at the very least, they've also brought Dallas Goedert a bit more into the pass catching rotation, which they should have done all along. They should have thought of those two as their like number one receiver, not that differently from how the Ravens do Andrews and Marquise Brown. But if they throw the ball, I like Smith. I would, if I were the Eagles, I would not even want to throw the ball that much. So if someone's a bit worried about Smith in fantasy, I'm not going to tell them they're wrong for it.
A couple years ago, you liked Jalen Reagor. I think you were your analysis was sound. Are you out on him moving forward? Are you giving up?
Out on him in Philadelphia, definitely. I mean, there's some stuff is wrong with him off the field. It seems like I don't know what. There was the thing about it, him just showing up like depressed because of his, I guess, friend got killed or something this offseason. I don't know what the story was exactly, but this stuff with him like dropping passes, like you knew he wasn't like a hands guy. That wasn't why he was valued as a prospect. He was valued as a prospect because he's a big play threat if you get him going downfield. And it's like, if you think back to his rookie year, his training camp, the hype was relentless. Like the team was just saying like, oh my God, he looks awesome. Carson Wentz said he looks like Julio Jones. And then he had a torn finger tendon and a torn rotator cuff in his shoulder, both of which had the prognoses reduced by like at least half. I remember when the shoulder thing came up, it was like, oh, this might be a season ender. And then they're like, oh, actually he's coming back in 2 weeks and he's just going to play with a torn labrum. I don't know if that labrum ever got repaired or if it needed surgery. If he didn't get that surgery, so he might still be playing with shoulder damage. He had the torn finger thing. Obviously the Eagles just kind of sucked in general that year. So it never really got going. And then this training camp this year, the tone was totally different. They're like, oh my God, he looks so sluggish. He doesn't look right. He's not doing anything right. So that's, I mean, not that it matters if he's damaged goods, he's damaged goods. But I think that's kind of what happened here because they were praising him. The media were saying like, oh man, he's making all these plays last training camp. This training camp, it was totally opposite. And in terms of the structure of the team, I don't think he fits usage wise. If they need to be this run heavy to make Hurts viable, then Goddard and Smith clearly take up the whatever lanes there are. And I don't think he has any place really in like a timing based offense or anything. It's like you need to put Reagor on the field to just have him running. You want him running as much as possible. Just put that speed on display. Get him running downfield. Throw bombs. Like I want to see him more like in a Rams kind of. I know there's a punctuality emphasis with McVay, but I want him running these routes downfield, off the play action. Like that's where he makes his living. He's not a Devonte Smith. He's the exact opposite of Devonte Smith. Like Smith maybe light on tools, but he's just superhumanly skilled as a wide receiver. Like Reagor was always raw. We always knew that, but we thought, with this kind of athleticism, you can harness just as a size speed phenom, you can make a defense stressed with his presence. And I don't see how the Eagles can do that.
He has this Tua thing going on, and what I mean by that is that Tua is always going to be compared to to Herbert, whereas Reagor is always going to be compared to Justin Jefferson. One of them was a massive hit; the other one we're still, jury's out a little bit. But you would think as a first round pick, they would find ways to get him the ball. Let's move over to the other side real quick. Antonio Gibson had some first round hype in redraft leagues this year. Disappointed largely, probably because of the injury. He's been back. I have to check his status this week. I heard some Jared Patterson talk this week, but is Antonio Gibson, to the best of your ability, is he in jeopardy of this? It seems like he's going to play through it at this point. The
issue is it's a new hip thing in addition to the prior toes foot.
Let's think about him moving forward, though. Just where do you think he should be ranked in Dynasty now? Again, we're switching back and forth. We're going over our Dynasty rankings in addition to doing some Week 17 prep for you. I just updated our Dynasty Superflex rankings. Among the running backs, where do you think I have him? Running back what?
15?
I have him at running back 9, but I think you're right there.
I'm in favor of that. No, the one thing he needs to do is fix the fumbling. That actually is a problem. Other than that, I think he projects just awesome. I think Antonio Gibson, granted, he does need better circumstances to prove it. The offensive line sucks and is beat up in addition to that. So playing hurt in addition to all that, I think that explains his numbers, but it's like this has been one of the worst case scenarios for him in terms of how this season could have played out. And he's got 9 touchdowns in 15 games on 538 snaps. He can do a lot more as a pass catcher. If Scott Turner is for some reason forced to stop trying to do this pet thing with JD McKissic and give targets on the basis of merit, then Antonio Gibson can go like peak David Johnson in fantasy. Like he's got the tools to do it. Absolutely.
Who would you rather have in your dynasty league? Would you rather have Saquon Barkley or would you rather have Antonio Gibson?
I think I would say Barkley if I can sell him immediately, because I think his market might be a little. I don't know if his market.
But if you're in a startup draft, and I
prefer Gibson as a player. I think he can do pretty much everything Barkley can, and I don't think Barkley sees the field very well.
Yeah, I have him I have Barkley at RB13 in our new dynasty rankings. I told you Gibson at 9. I may tick him down to like 10 or 11, but not really because so I'm squarely on the Gibson team right here. I think Barkley is he's kind of a stay away for me unless he falls at like the RB15 or 16.
Yeah, it's
tough. I'm not in. I'm not in anymore. I have nothing to do with what he did at first. It's just he's now entering his age 25 season already, and you talked about in the beginning of the pod the short window. I mean, is he going to get a second contract, like a lucrative second contract that protects him like how Zeke is protected? I don't know. I don't know if a team's going to do it. We'll see. Let's move. Let's keep moving. Terry McLaurin. Man, was I wrong about him? I was being so proactive getting him on all of my fantasy teams this year. He is now squarely in the Allen Robinson can't get a quarterback to in my career yet. I mean, what is good? Are you still optimistic about Terry McLaurin? I mean, we still love the player, but you can't start him in week 17. And then where are you from a moving forward perspective?
Well, it got out of hand recently because.
And by the way, talk through this. I just need to reset something. I'll be back in 1 minute. Keep going through it.
Well, yeah, I think things only got so bad with McLaurin lately because things got so bad with the Washington offense lately, and specifically trying to play with a 5th string center is the kind of thing. Like if you end up in that situation as an offense in the NFL, you just have no hope, and you won't have hope until the situation changes. So I view recent weeks as just like non-applicable. As far as projecting McLaurin going forward, because I can't project Washington being down to their like cumulatively 4th string offensive line. Like anytime that happens, the players in question have no hope. So it's a real pain. The pain is real for the fantasy investors of McLaurin. It's not like they get a mulligan on those grounds. And so I definitely, I don't mean to minimize their pain, but McLaurin has been the exact player that his proponents said that he would be. He's actually got on a per snap, per game basis, or not per game, the per snap basis. He's basically got the same numbers as last year within, reasonable margin. So the question of whether he can be more than what he's been on a per snap basis the last 2 years comes down to the quarterback question. And yeah, admittedly, I don't know how it changes there. I don't know how they do better than Heineke. Not that I'm assuming the Eagles won't trade up for a quarterback. They might, but I am more worried about Washington going for a rookie quarterback who is bad and setting back McLaurin like another period of time. I'm not convinced any of these quarterbacks are as good as Taylor Heineke, to put into perspective how lowly I think of this class. So McLaurin at the very least needs better offensive line play. And I think if the Washington offensive line got better, and especially if they could add another threat, if Curtis Samuel could turn into the threat that he was supposed to be, then I actually can imagine personally Taylor Heineke playing okay, not certainly not good, but like good enough for McLaurin to be the 1,400 yard receiver that he clearly could be. Because I actually don't even think there's a clearly better receiver in the NFL than Terry McLaurin. So for me, it just comes down to the surrounding details, which admittedly are kind of bleak right now.
Yeah, Mitch Trubisky is going to be a free agent that, believe it or not, that some teams are going to be interested in.
For sure.
Ron Rivera does have that history with Taylor Heineke, and I know he's at times been a spark for that team. I'm not saying that that's where Mitch Trubisky ends up, but I think that Trubisky could end up there. If, at least as a backup with a chance for a camp battle, that might be his best option. So, and I think for fantasy,
there's your dynasty quarterback lottery ticket that you get.
Oh,
get
yeah.
Trubisky now. Yeah.
Yeah, I've picked him up in all the leagues that still allow me to pick up players, and if he was on the waiver wire, anyone that has a chance to start next year, Marcus Mariota, you want to pick him up right now, and those guys in your Superflex 2 QB leagues. All right, I'm picking the Eagles in that game, giving 3.5. I'm assuming you're doing the same thing there against Washington. Okay, moving on. Giants are going into Chicago. Chicago is a 6-point favorite. This is, we always say like, oh, this game is garbage, the Giants, but like all of these guys are playing for their jobs next year. There's one thing that the NFL does right, that the players don't tank. You can't tank. You can't go into an NFL game playing 75% to try to improve your draft position, because what does improving your draft position do? It makes you, the player, more likely to not have a job next year. So the players themselves are not tanking. They're always trying.
If they take it's because they're quitting on the coach, which, if the Giants haven't done it yet, I guess they'll never do it.
Yeah. So let's start with the Giants side of this. Where are you going to be on Kadarius Toney? I mean, you're not really going to play any players. Like, in fact, if you're in a redraft league and you have Saquon Barkley, I would consider dropping Barkley in hopes that your opponent picks him up and plays him. Like that's how much I don't want to play Barkley right now with the Giants offense. Given if I have better options, obviously.
Yeah, I am so incapable of thinking through Barkley at this point. I get no reaction. Anybody says anything about him, I'm like, yeah, sure, that makes sense. But I think it could be a tough matchup for him, because he is not a self-creator. Like, he needs space created for him, and when it's there, he can eat it up. He's obviously an amazing athlete, so he's a terror once that space exists. But if Akeem Hicks is going against this weak offensive line, if Roquan Smith is on the field, then, and by the way, they are, I'm just speaking hypothetically for some reason, those two guys alone are enough to make me worried about Barkley in this matchup. So I at once think if somebody misses their gap assignment, if somebody misses a tackle, Barkley can outrun them in a straight line. I just don't have any reason to think that straight line will be there for him. So the Giants could be about as ugly as whatever our worst fears are. With that said, Toney does have a good matchup here. I don't think, even if the Bears moved Jalen Johnson into the slot, I don't know if it would really suit him to be against a guy like Toney. Against a guy like Toney, you want someone who's also an elite athlete, a quick twitch elite athlete, like Jair Alexander would probably maybe be the first name I think of. Jalen Johnson is a fine enough athlete, but he's more of like a technician guy, an instincts guy. Instincts and technique don't do anything to save you against Kadarius Toney's quickness. So I think it's a good setup for him, but with that said, if the Bears just kind of give the slot corner a lot of help, that could be enough to make it tough on Toney, given the quarterback play.
Yeah, so if you're in the chat right now, let us know if you trust Saquon Barkley in Week 17, if you have him on any of your teams, and probably if you have him, you're not in the playoffs or certainly not the finals. He was probably your first or second round pick. Moving over to if Chicago defense, by the way, is on your waiver wire and you're in a championship game, even if you don't need them, pick them up. You don't want your opponent using them against you. The block pickup is always an underrated move. And you hear a lot of analysts talk about it, but we'll just underline that for our audience right here. Okay, so Chicago, you were in on Justin Fields. As a Jet fan, I wanted the Jets to draft Justin Fields. I definitely didn't want Zach Wilson at that point. I like enough what I've seen out of him to be confident that he'll be good for fantasy. Presumably they're going to get a new coach. Where are you going to be at on Justin Fields moving forward for next year?
I like Fields. I think he's had a weird collection of narratives swirling around him, weird takes in the media about him. I feel like a lot of them are kind of both the pro and the anti Justin Fields cases have struck me as kind of incoherent at different points. I think it's not that confusing to tell what he is. He's really athletic, obviously. He's big as a quarterback, so some of that rushing ability, you can project volume with it. Crucial for fantasy. And in terms of his passing ability, at worst, he's a guy who can make every throw and make it very accurately. The question is, does he read the field? Does he process the field? Does he make his decisions with the level of quickness and conviction that he needs to show off this arm, this otherwise accurate, powerful arm that he has? And I think that part is the one we can't really know. Some people could guess correctly either way and end up being right about it, but I don't see how we can know from what we've seen, what's been disclosed to us, I don't see how we can figure it out. I think it's also possible that, he stays the same and still is good in fantasy, maybe good in real life. Like if he was just on a much better offense with much better players around him, we might have looked at this rookie season and thought he was a star the whole time, if the conditions were more favorable. So there's a way he can make it work, even if he doesn't improve, or I think it's possible. But I also think it's possible he improves. Like I think it's, at Ohio State, he had like 43 touchdowns and 3 interceptions that one year. Like, why would he be any different than he was? Like, why would he try to develop some additional part of his game? He couldn't have conceived of it. He was already perfect, basically. And specifically what he did in college that he can't do in the NFL is he would kind of hold on to the ball, wait for guys to get really wide open before throwing the pass. Or if a guy wasn't wide open, he'd say, you know what, I don't even want to bother. I'll just run. And it worked every time. In the NFL, he's having to make the throw in that case, or at least throw the ball away in that case, or decide to run sooner on the play, something. And I think with the conditions changing, we're finding out whether out of necessity he can change himself. So I don't know how to know which way that ball is going to break. I'm kind of optimistic because I think he shows a lot of poise. Like he's definitely a hard worker. He's not like scared of the platform, It's like he's built for this kind of pressure, high pressure as it might be. So I'm pretty optimistic. It would be reassuring, get more reassuring yet to me if they got like Brian Dable or whoever,
I like that call.
Something like that. But I'm more of an optimist. I think he's kind of in the same boat as Marcus Mariota, which is to say, I can imagine a different timeline where things broke more in his favor and he's like a star quarterback. But yeah, if everything goes wrong for him and if he kind of struggles to improve with his recognition of the field, then maybe he kind of stagnates after a year or two.
Okay, right now we're going to take a quick break for a word from our sponsor. All right, we're back. If you're watching on the live stream, you didn't have to hear a word from our sponsor. But if you're listening on the audio podcast, you just heard those amazing spots from our sponsor. So let's pick it up right here. We were talking about, I'm with Mario Puig of RotoWire. You know him. You love him. He's the rookie guru. He'll be coming back in the offseason, giving us a lot of rookie analysis all season long. I'm sitting in for John Mckenzie, who, again, will join Mario. And you guys do your offseason podcast on Thursdays?
I can't remember, but if we do it on a different day, we'll definitely let you know. In the meantime, we're planning on sticking with Thursdays, I guess.
Okay. All right.
I suppose.
Because as you know, the loyal audience knows that we're adding a second Dynasty offseason podcast. I'll be hosting that one. We'll have Mario and John on there doing some rookie breakdowns, but more Dynasty content, the better, right? I mean, there's never enough. I think it's an underserved portion of fantasy football. Most people, they love fantasy football and they love it all year round. And right now, you can get a RotoWire subscription for free for 10 days. Try everything out. No credit card. Just go to rotowire.com/try. Check out Mario's one quarterback dynasty rankings. We just posted some Superflex rankings. Go in there and check them out. Tell him where we're right. And make sure you tweet Mario and tell him exactly what he did wrong. He loves that. All right. So let's go over to, let's pick that game real quick. I wouldn't bet a nickel on it, but I'll take Chicago at home giving 6. I have no faith in the Giants to do anything but stomped.
Yeah, same thing.
All right. Bengals. This is going to be, I think this is the game of the week. The Bengals at home. Chiefs are coming in. Chiefs are getting giving 5 points on. This is the real test because we've seen Cincinnati get stomped by the Jets and then beat up on good teams. So this is a good yardstick game for Cincinnati. Joe Burrow, I have moved him up. It might be a little reactionary, but I've moved him up to QB4 in our dynasty rankings only because I think his game has a little bit more longevity to it than Kyler Murray or Lamar Jackson. So start with Burrow. Where do you see him moving forward? We know that is he a start this week against that Kansas City defense? I've asked you a lot. Break him down.
Well, I think it's a bit of a dangerous setup for Burrow against the Kansas City Chiefs defense, but it's pretty much because of one guy. That's Chris Jones. And it's kind of like we were talking before about the Titans against whatever that bum offensive line they're playing against Miami.
Yep.
When you have a guy like Jeffrey Simmons or a guy like Chris Jones, the modern Richard Seymours of the NFL, like those guys can really wreck a certain kind of offensive line. If an offensive line doesn't have a strong interior foundation, a guy like Chris Jones or Richard Seymour, they might not be the sack leaders every year. They might not be particularly close to the sack leading contention, But in that particular circumstance, they are about as dangerous as any player can be. Because if you don't have that good solid interior, Chris Jones can just wipe out 2 or 3 blockers, and he's 2 strides away from your quarterback at that point. And the Bengals, their offensive line isn't as bad as last year, but I do think it's still that category of offensive line than one like the Colts, where if the Colts are going against the Chiefs, I'm like, oh, Chris Jones isn't in trouble, but the Chiefs are, like they need him to be this total monster to win here. And against the Bengals, I think Chris Jones could be that kind of monster. So if they do find some way to neutralize him, though, then even if Charvarius Ward, Fenton, whoever are doing a good job, and they've done a pretty good job lately, receivers like Higgins and Chase can only be covered for so long and so many times. And if you give them enough chances, they're going to beat better corners than these. So if Burrow has the time for those guys to set up their routes and really, really get running downfield, that's where the upside scenario comes in. And in that case, the upside could be enormous, but it's such a volatile situation, I think, because if Jones is kind of, tossing linemen around, getting to Burrow, hitting him, we've seen the Bengals also kind of take their offense into a shell and just run the ball and try to protect Burrow, which is understandable enough. So I have no idea how to guess whether the Bengals can contain Chris Jones, and if they can do it, do they leave themselves vulnerable in some other way? I don't really know. But if Burrow has the time, I think we're just at the point where it's like these 2 receivers, and Boyd, I don't mean to make Boyd sound like he's some kind of bum or something, but just Higgins and Chase in a year, especially 2 years, might both be regarded as top 5 receivers in the NFL.
Yeah, I'd see that as they're going to be ranked similarly to what we had Larry Fitzgerald and Aquan Bolden in their peaks, like where they're going like 10 picks apart. And I'm not going to tell anybody that likes T. Higgins more than Jamar Chase that they're wrong. I'm not prepared to do that right now for fantasy. Chase, full disclosure, is like my wide receiver 2 or 3 in the dynasty rankings. I have Higgins at 13, but I'm not sure that's correct. That just bakes in what I think the market is going to do.
Yeah, I don't even want to make the call. I think they're both awesome. I love T. Higgins. I think it's safe to say I'm higher on T. Higgins than most people. But yeah, they both grade just pretty much perfect for me.
Yeah, T's gotten a lot of fans over the last month with these monster games.
Had a lot of haters in the first couple of months, and it was weird. I was like, come on, he could flip this entire narrative in like 2 weeks.
So my ranking of Joe Burrow at QB4 behind Mahomes, Herbert, and Allen, ahead of Kyler Murray, Dak, Lamar, and Trevor Lawrence. Are you comfortable with that, or you think that's a little reckless?
I think it would need to be 6 point per passing touchdown league before I would put him ahead of a couple of those guys, like Lamar especially. And
split the difference for me. So let's say it's 5 point.
I would put Lamar ahead, but Burrow maybe. Especially if you are putting value on the lesser injury risk to less running reasoning, it's hard to argue about Burrow's longevity in that case. Although for whatever it's worth, he is like a little older than Lamar, I think, or they're the same age.
Here, I can tell you right now, because I had Herb, our tech guy, put the ages in to the 10th, by the way. I had him do because but right now, you're right. He's a few months older than him, but not, when you're talking about the quarterback position.
Yeah, I only mention it because it's like when we get some of these 21-year-old rookies and stuff, someone might think Burrow is 22 or something, but he's actually 25.
Yeah, he's got that Cooper Kupp thing going on. Yeah, came into the league with like a full beard, as I like to say. Yeah. All right. So we'll move on from that game. We agree Joe Mixon next. Oh, let me ask you this: for redraft next year, I had this discussion with Jeff Erickson. I said, no. Joe Mixon's going to be a top 5 overall pick in redraft leagues next year in 1 QB. It's just going to happen.
I can imagine some of those receivers that you mentioned, that heavy wide receiver first round. I can imagine some of that encroaching the top 5 myself.
Fine, pick 8. What I'm saying
I'm not against it. I mean, you don't even need to believe Mixon is that good specifically in an offense like this one. If you have 2 top 10 receivers and a quarterback who's in the top 10, whoever's at running back is going along for the ride, and Mixon might also be pretty good. So.
All right, chat, help us out. Were you going to draft Joe Mixon next year in redraft leagues? Are you going to take him in the top 10 picks of your fantasy draft, or do you think he's still like a 1-2 turn type of player? So let us know in the chat where you would take him. All right, on this marathon episode of the Week 17 preview show, Mario, are you still holding up? Are you good here?
Oh, yeah, I'm fine.
All right. All right, so we got, people need content right now. A lot of content goes quiet, but this is the week where everybody's off, or they're taking, works offices are a little quieter. They need football content to listen to, and what better than to listen to us, right? Haha. All right. So who do you like in that game? The Chiefs 5 on the road, or giving 5 on the road in Cincinnati. Who are you taking here? You have to bet your whole next mortgage payment on it.
Yeah, I think I'd go with the Chiefs, but I feel, it's not that I feel so safe doing it. It's just that I do have a lot of respect for Chris Jones, and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't really remember the Bengals doing anything especially exotic on defense. I feel like they kind of just play like ISO ball, and if you do that against the Chiefs offense, Tyreek will just devour you almost immediately. So if the Bengals call the kind of smart, disciplined, too high defense all the time, I can still see that giving the Chiefs trouble, but I can't tell if that's really how the Bengals play. And anyway, I gotta kind of just defer to Mahomes' respect, I guess, this late in the year, right or wrong.
I'm going to take the Bengals with the point at home, but I agree with your logic there. I'm not even picking Cincinnati to win. And if you don't think a team's going to win, it's not wise to take them with the points. But that's
points are a lot, I will say.
Yeah. I mean, you could see this being just a complete war and decided by a field goal. All right, let's move on. Broncos. Are the Broncos still alive? Let's say they're going into the Chargers right now. That spreads up to 6.5. It opened at 5.5. Are the Broncos still technically alive for a playoff spot here?
I haven't looked, but probably everybody's playoff eligible apparently.
Yeah, I mean, do you think Vic Fangio? Right? Do you think Vic Fangio is going to be back as the head coach next year?
Not particularly. No, not after that Von Miller trade.
Right. Right. Okay. Yeah, I don't think he's going to be either. So that's going to the Denver's often talked about the Rodgers landing spot, or because they have the requisite weapons. And listen, I think that's why they signed all those contracts with Cortland Sutton, with Tim Patrick. They have Jerry Jeudy. That all those contracts are not for this year. Those contracts are to attract a veteran quarterback.
Maybe. I mean, I like Patrick. Obviously, their pass catching group is as deep as any in the NFL. So it's very frustrating that they went into this year with the quarterback personnel that they did. It's like they should have like 2 top 10 tight ends, 3 top 30 receivers, and so on. So I don't know. I don't think Fangio is particularly impressive in his role.
And what's the offensive coordinator's name? The one that used to be the Giants, Shermer. Yeah, now I don't
really like him either. I don't know who they're going to get better. And if they don't get Rodgers, which I don't think Rodgers is going anywhere actually, but if they don't get Rodgers, like what the hell are they even going to do? Like take one of these rookies? I guess maybe one of those. I was just bashing Kenny Pickett and I guess all of them really, but it's not hard to be better than Bridgewater and Locke. So I don't know. I guess one of them could be a boost for those receivers there, but yeah, I don't think they're going to get a quarterback
I don't either.
worth the talent of whoever they get is going to be a disservice to these pass catchers.
Yeah, if we're talking about Rodgers, and again, this is going to be like first take. This is going to be the most debated subject, but I think that Rodgers, if he does leave Green Bay, and like you just said, it now it's like 50-50 at best, but the Pittsburgh Steelers are a place where I think Rodgers could end up. I don't know how they get the deal done, but to me, Rodgers is going to want that veteran coach, that CEO coach that he could respect. And also he's going to want a set of weapons, which he thinks you're okay. A set of weapons that he thinks is at least better, a top 10. And I think the Steelers qualify with Deontay Johnson, with Chase Claypool. You and I both love Pat Freiermuth. I think he's going to be a top 10 tight end next year. So that could be a Rodgers spot. We'll get back to that in a moment. Moving over to the Charger side of the things, is Eckler going to be playing this week? And if so, he's just an auto start in your championship, right?
If he's playing, yeah, I didn't read whether he was vaccinated or not. I guess you would like his chances a little better if he is, but yeah. So the Broncos pass defense is pretty good, right? It might be quite good. And the Chargers have struggled to move the ball through the air at times in some games where they probably shouldn't have, given some of the receivers they have in Herbert. So if Williams is out, right? Like he's
out. He's out.
Okay. So yeah, that's actually a dangerous spot for the Chargers, I feel like. But yeah, if Eckler can play, they have to feed him that much more because of Williams' absence.
Yeah, and I like the rookie Josh Palmer. I've been moving him up and up and up in my dynasty rankings. I'm not saying that he's going to be a difference maker for your team in the future, but I think that he could enter like trustable wide receiver 3. Like I could see him finishing next year as like the wide receiver like 29. Is he a player that you? Where were you in the pre-draft process, and from what you've seen so far in the NFL, is he someone that you like?
I think he's redundant to Keenan Allen, so I think they'd need to get rid of Allen. Or
That's not happening.
if they play Palmer outside, his efficiency is going to fall off a cliff. I think because I don't think defenses really pay attention to him right now, and I don't think he has the speed to function downfield. He makes plays at the catch point pretty well, and he's got to be like a good practice guy, a good attention to detail in meetings and practices or whatever. But he isn't a player who threatens outside against competent outside coverage to me anyway. So I think one way that I would feel better about Palmer is if actually the Chargers moved on from Mike Williams and put just like a speed guy in that spot, because this offense has had this problem all year. Basically, like they don't have any speed, so you can just play red zone defense against them all the time. And I think that until that changes, Herbert can have these just unnecessary cold stretches.
Yeah, and it's almost sacrilegious that I missed talking about the Denver running backs, especially when we talk about getting to our dynasty rankings. A lot of Javonte Williams' dynasty ranking will heavily depend on if Melvin Gordon stays or goes. And I think people just looking at early rankings across the content provider industry is that people are assuming Melvin Gordon's gone. I'm not making that assumption. I think that Melvin Gordon has a little bit of this Frank Gore stick around veteran thing to him. He's going to be 29 next year. Where are you on Javonte? I know you were pretty strong on him coming out of college, right? I forget exactly.
Well, I thought he was good, but I hated the redraft narrative around him. Like I didn't believe it made much sense to think he would just toss aside Melvin Gordon this year. If only because like the Broncos couldn't really put Gordon anywhere. Like they kind of had to pay him this year. And if anything, I thought they were going to say, well, what the hell are we paying him $9 million for or whatever, if we're not going to put him on the field every so often for 30 snaps or whatever. So with that said, I do expect the Broncos to get rid of Gordon this offseason. Like there's no cap penalty at this point, or if I remember.
Well, he was a 2-year. They signed him for 2 years.
Okay.
Right.
Well, I think he's gone. That I don't think they're going to resign. I think the reason they kept him is because they, sunk cost kind of thing.
But don't you think they're going to bring in somebody else? I mean, every team has a second guy, like like a James Conner or a.
It's just I think whoever they get will be paid much less, and they'll be less like institutional pressure to get that other guy on the field. But I also think that people. I will say the Javonte Williams superfans are some of the most insane people I've ever come across. And I think they are extremely loud and they hold a disproportionate share of just the chatter that occurs around fantasy football and especially dynasty than almost any other player. Like I've never seen anything like it, honestly. Not since Hakeem Butler anyway.
Let me ask you this. And that's funny, by the way, that Hakeem Butler thing is funny. Cause that was the,
you could not say anything skeptical of him. You'd get just killed for that.
Right. And obviously if you said those things, you were wrong. Javonte, the Javonte crowd has been right.
To be clear, to be clear, Javonte Williams is the good version of this scenario. It's like the Hakeem Butler people were just the other most loud group I can remember off the top of my head, but he's good. The one thing I will say though is like I get people haranguing me sometimes too. It's like he had 130 yards against the Chiefs. You have to say he's special now. Like I don't know. I don't think I do. Like, do you think David Montgomery is special? Like I think he's David Montgomery, Najee Harris, like that kind of tier of running back. Good player, but like you cannot make these people happy unless you say, no, Javonte Williams is maybe the best running back in the league. And he's not. He's a smaller Marion Barber or something. Good for him. He's going to be a really good player. But he's not Nick Chubb. He's not Jonathan Taylor. He's not Dalvin Cook. He's not Christian McCaffrey. Really good player, but that's never enough for the biggest Javonte fans.
Speaking of like truthers, like who you truther for? Like who maybe hasn't hit yet that you're still truthering for? Any player in the NFL?
Well, I guess the most recent / most amusing case was Duke Johnson. But even like him and Rashad Penny, though, I was like, with Penny, I was like, oh, I don't know. I thought he was good, but I guess he's so injured now. I don't know if he is anymore. And then Penny has the last couple games that he did. But yeah, I always like those two guys. I was always frustrated that they didn't get more of a shot. I mentioned this on the radio with Chris last week, but my all-time truther freak out, and I still, I will get worked up about this if I think about it too much. But Old Dominion had this running back named Ray Lowry, who I am convinced could start for teams, and he's a running backs coach for some high school now because no one gave him a chance. He was the last James Robinson, the James Robinson that did not have the lucky bounce there.
It shows you how important draft capital is. Draft capital doesn't guarantee you're going to be good. It just guarantees you're going to get a lot of chances.
Yeah, or in Gordon's case at that point in his career, the contract, the money guy saying like, "Hey, where's this guy's numbers? Why am I paying him so much?" Helps have that.
All right, we're going to cover one more game before we wrap up this episode of the Week 17 preview show. He's Mario Puig. I'm Alan Seslowsky, sitting in for John Mckenzie, who will be back next week. All right, let's talk about the Arizona-Dallas game. This is an interesting game to me. Dallas is home, giving 5.5. Dallas, they need to, it's still possible they could get the 1 seed, so they have to keep pressing on, right? It's not out of hand yet, and obviously the 1 seed for all of the football fans, they know that's the only bye. Let's start with the Dallas side. Dallas backfield. I'm not as down on Zeke as everybody else is. But then again, my expectations are lower for fantasy than most. I expect him to be a 16. He's no longer 28 touch Zeke. He's 16 touches, a couple of catches. Where are you on Zeke in your championship? He's an auto start, right?
Yeah. I think he's. I know he was playing hurt for a while there, and he had that week 1 against Tampa where they barely tried to run. But I think Zeke has done a good job all year. I think he's better than most people give him credit for at this point. I think people generally give too much credit to Tony Pollard. I think they're both good players, but Pollard is a role player for a reason, and Elliott is a starter for a reason, or so I believe. And in a game like this, this could be one of the more up-tempo games. Obviously, it's high stakes, but these teams could both run more plays than they tend to, and the Cardinals already tend to move at a faster pace than most teams.
Yeah,
so
this is the highest total on the board right now, I think. I'm just looking at I believe it's tied for the highest total on the board. So your shootout. Yeah. Okay, so you like Zeke. Wide receiver wise, Amari Cooper got the squeaky wheel narrative going for him last week. He got his, 11 targets or maybe 11 catches. I have to look at the stat line again, but he had been quiet for some time since he came back, complained. That was at the cost of CeeDee Lamb last week. Which Cowboys receiver do you like best in this matchup?
Well, I like them both, and it is kind of frustrating to me that apparently Cooper's target volume was an issue of intention with the coaches. Like, get them both the ball. Just throw it to them. It's easy. But
it was Dalton Schultz that ended up siphoning some of the targets last week.
So defenses sell out against Cooper and Lamb, and they leave these underneath kind of check down things to Schultz. And it makes sense for Dallas to take those targets because it kind of forces the defense to play them more honestly. And if they don't, then it's like, okay, we'll just keep getting 9-yard gains with Schultz until you do change your coverages. And so far they haven't been willing. It's kind of like the Chiefs, and he's almost like their Darrell Williams or something, where they're selling out to stop Kelsey and Hill, and they say, fine, throw it to Williams 10 times if you want. But sometimes you get different looks. I think it's in the nature of the Cardinals to be more aggressive than that, to try to certainly blitz more. Certainly they disguise their coverages so much. I don't even know if they'd really have the luxury of bracketing guys the way some other defenses do. It's like they'd have to give away their assignments before the snaps in a way that they're normally loath to. So I think the question of whether Dak can get going is pending, like how much Zeke does and how much that pass rush gets to him when they send it. And they will send it, but Dallas might be able to manage it. And Dak is awesome at reading pre-snap stuff. If anybody can figure out what they're doing pre-snap, he might be able to do it. And he might he might guess correctly before the snap, like this guy's open, we got the hot route on him. So I think that Lamb and Cooper both have really high projections here, despite the kind of explosiveness of the Arizona pass rush, and despite the fact that the Cardinals are better against the pass than the run. They're better against the pass than the run because the pass rush does all that lifting. Those corners can't cover. Byron Murphy's good, but the other two I don't think can cover Cooper, Lamb, Gallup at all. So if Dak needs to, and Dak has the time to throw, I think he can light them up. I do think, though, it also makes sense for Dallas to give Zeke his biggest workload in a while, because if you don't have to subject yourself to that pass rush, that might be the first most ideal course.
And Tyron Smith is looking good to come back, I believe, right? He should be.
Well, that would be nice. I hadn't followed the most recent news on him, but that would definitely be nice. That's bad news for Chandler Jones, for instance, if Tyron Smith is in the field in the game, and you want bad news for Chandler Jones if you're the Cowboys.
Yeah, that's still up in the air as far as I last read. But again, we haven't checked our notifications in the last 2 hours, so everything we probably said in this podcast is probably only null and void. Is Dalton Schultz firmly now inside the tight end 12 cut line for Dynasty?
I would say sell high in Dynasty. I mean, I think he is very clearly a product of this system and teams.
He's like this year's Robert Tonyan type of thing.
I think Tunion's the better player, but you're right in the sense that Schultz's numbers are more sustainable in a way because he's not dependent on 12 yards a target, but he is dependent on receivers as good as Lamb, Gallup, and Cooper all being on the field. If he goes to some other team, he would be I think an even worse outcome, Austin Hooper or something like that.
Hayden Hurst type of thing, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
He's good. He's good now, though. You're rolling with him now, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, he's a plug and play. He's probably a top 6 tight end on the year. I'd have to take a look at the numbers. Let's finish up with the Cardinals. Kyler Murray, you're starting him. DeAndre Hopkins is probably going to miss this game, I think. Yeah, he's on IR, right? So
yeah, he's out.
Christian Kirk, AJ Green, Rondell Moore is going to be out. Who's your flavor? Who's your pass catcher? Is it Zach Ertz? Who's starting on the Arizona side?
It's got to be Ertz and Kirk, and they do run most often in the middle of the field, which is kind of good. It gets you away from Diggs and gets you on Jordan Lewis, who I don't know if he's going to be out for this game too. If Dallas is running a backup slot corner, all the better for those two. But yeah, I don't see how the Cardinals might need to run to move consistently. I don't know if their passing game sets up that well, and I don't know how much I trust them to run well, especially given Connor's status. I don't know what to think about all that. I like Dallas to cover even at the 5.5, actually.
In the this week, the underreported hero lap for Chase Edmonds was not done enough. Chase Edmonds has league winner last week. I mean, it's 26 fantasy points. I mean, selfishly, I have both Connor and Edmonds on the same team. I hope one of them sits so I could start the other one.
Yeah, I would plan on going with Edmonds. I don't know what Connor's. I don't know if they said a specific injury, but I hated how that heel injury that he had followed an ankle injury and how that was all stuff that he had to deal with last 2 years with the Steelers. He ended up hurt. It was all injuries like that. And anyway, I was kind of hating on Cliff specifically because it looked like they were going to play Connor last week. And I was like, no, don't play Connor. It's unreasonable. So credit to him for not doing that. I guess we got to keep an eye on this Edmonds back injury, but he's practicing as of yesterday, so it should be fine, knock on wood. But yeah, they're both good players, and if one of them's out of the picture, it makes it so easy to make the call, obviously.
Hey, Mario, you're the perfect guy to ask this question. Our guy, Jeff Kasner, in the chat, he asked if Kyler's season, was his injury a thing, or is he actually regressed as a player?
I think last week was more like losing Hopkins was the big problem because this particular offense that Cliff Kingsbury runs, it is basically just ISO ball. It's just line up and beat the guy in front of you, even though the guy in front of you knows what you're doing. It's all based on one-on-one matchups. Hopkins is the kind of receiver who can thrive in that setup. It doesn't matter to him if the defense knows it's going to him. He's getting the ball. Guys like AJ Green at this point in his career, guy like Antoine Wesley, that's not going to cut it. And so I think a lot of the times you're seeing Kyler basically play 10 on 11, 9 on 11, and I don't think Cliff does anything disguise-wise to make up for that. I think everybody knows every single play what they're running. So I think it's at once not Kyler's fault, but if the Cardinals still have Kingsbury as coach, which it seems like they definitely will, I don't know what changes. So I am lower on Kyler going forward than I was, certainly 2 years ago when I was still optimistic about Kingsbury.
I heard a really funny analogy. A friend of the show, Scott Pianowski, and on his podcast said that Kyler Murray was like that stick of bubble gum, or his it might have been Salfino, his broadcasting partner, that said it. He said he was like that stick of bubble gum inside of a baseball card pack. You put it in your mouth and it's delicious, and then 30 seconds later it tastes like garbage. It tastes like a piece of cardboard. So Kyler Murray starts off the season. Maybe
Cliff Kingsbury, but I actually think Kyler is a clearly great player. I don't think it's a structural issue to me. He's not a flash in the pan. He's not like a mirage. He's not a system product. He's a victim of the system.
That's fair. And then our guy Scott asked if Kyler will have a bad game this week or an average game. I think the setup is there for him to have a really good game, given the high total. So they're going to have to keep up. This is going to be the DFS chalk shootout of the week. All right, Mario, we did a 2-hour marathon. We missed on a few games that we didn't cover, but you can ask us about those on Twitter if you have any specific questions. I'm at Alan Seslowsky. He's at RotoWire Mario. You can get all his content on RotoWire. I strongly recommend that you check out our Dynasty, our off-season content. You can get it all free right now for 10 days. Go to rotowire.com/try. Get a 10-day free trial. Mario's 1 QB rankings are up there for Dynasty. My Superflex rankings are up there. What else are you working on that's going to be there this season?
Well, my rankings are still kind of bad at the moment. I mean to get them more sharpened within the next few days. But yeah, once the regular season ends, and depending on when our magazine deadlines are, I would normally work around that to try to get whatever off-season Dynasty content we can. So it's great to have you on board, Alan, because
Thanks,
I kind of go radio silent for the magazine, and luckily with you around, we can still give people something during that time.
Well, as you know, and here you go. Just pucker up because I'm about to give you some love right now, Mario. You know that you and John are two of the reasons that I started doing Dynasty analysis. I look up to you guys, and I'm so happy to be working with you guys alongside of you. So keep doing what you're doing.
That's very heartwarming. So thank you.
Well, that is the truth. That is the truth. You know, I followed you guys for a long time, listening to you guys do the podcast, and you, along with Chris and Jeff and the whole crew here, are the ones that inspired me to start doing content and gave me the confidence to feel like I knew what I was talking about. So
awesome.
So thank you for that. But let's end with on that note. Let's transfer that to our friends at Thrive. Thrive is back for another season of fantasy football. They're running a huge guaranteed contest every week of the NFL season. With Thrive, you can eliminate the countless hours of research and focus on only the top tier athletes. Mara, just so you know, Thrive is like a props game. You pick like an either or, but they don't have like all these like ancillary players. You can be like, hey, is Kyler Murray or Dak Prescott? Who's going to have more passing yards? So it's a really cool game. Sign up today. You get 6 free months of RotoWire. We just talked about a 10-day free subscription. If you get a free 6-month subscription to RotoWire, and here's how you do it. You visit rotowire.com/thrive, THRIVE. Deposit a minimum of $10 and you get 100% deposit bonus up to $100. So if you put $50 into Thrive, you're going to get a free $50 to play with. Plus, you're going to get the free 6 months of RotoWire. Play your first paid contest and you get free 6 months of RotoWire. That's it, man. So we've told you how to get all this great stuff for free. Go over to Thrive. I love playing on Thrive. I've played a few times this season. I'm going to be playing this week and certainly throughout the playoffs. All right, he's Mario Puig. You know him. He's the rookie guru. He'll be back with next week with John Mckenzie, who I'm sitting in for. Until next time, everybody, we'll see you. Good luck in Week 17. And when you win those championships, post them. We want to see your winning rosters. Good luck, all. Bye-bye.